folks. I think we'll get underway. It's a beautiful evening. It's a nice drive from Charlottetown tonight. And I was just looking at a few notes and some names that I had from the Kensington meeting. Gosh, some names are the same ones that are here tonight. In fact, some of the same ones are Lurie. And anyway, it's nice to have you, and thank you for taking the time. I normally stand, but I think the room is perhaps better if I sit, stand in the sense of making some opening comments. And, the media haven't been coming to any of these recent meetings. I guess the competition for news stories is a little heavy. We've had everything from a poultry sign to the Queen cancelling all her engagements for the better part of a week, Stompin' Tom passing away, and the new Pope elected last night. So what's happening to the Land Protection Act in Prince Edward Island is hard to make some news. But we have a couple of students that are here from Holland College. We had one at the O'Leary meeting, and they come to these meetings, and they have to do little assignments to pass them in, take notes what's happened. And so I didn't realize that until the night. I knew the student was present in O'Leary. In the event, this is Patrick Carroll, and he's my scribe. And everything that's said here tonight is being recorded, and it's available eventually online. There are different ways of handling meetings like this, and I have my own style. And if you'd like to sit down at a mic, it's fine. If you'd like to stand here, fine. And it's even possible to make comments where you are, provided we can hear you. I just ask you to direct your attention to the little handout that was passed out and the long sheet of paper. In my day job, they call this a legal-sized piece of paper. And it indicates that in the middle of November, Executive Council appointed me to conduct an inquiry under the Public Inquiries Act in respect to the Lands Protection Act of Prince Edward Island. It's been 30 years since the act was passed in the spring of 1982. I was somewhat involved in the drafting of that legislation when I was in cabinet in the McLean government. Last September, the government put an ad in the paper that they asked for people that were interested in becoming the commissioner to submit their names. So I submitted my name and a couple of letters of reference, and filled a little application and sent it in and went on holidays, and came back and found that I was appointed. If you look at the center of the long sheet of paper, it indicates that the purpose of this inquiry is to examine, inquire into, and report regarding 1, the adequacy of existing aggregate land holding limits given changes in agriculture, provincial land use, and ownership trends in rural communities. 2, options for reducing red tape and regulatory requirements while ensuring that the Act can be effectively administered and enforced. 3, legislative concerns that have arisen involving such issues as land holding limits as they apply to utilities. Application thresholds as they apply to multiple owners, and the information and deeming requirements for nonprofit corporations. Any other matter the Commissioner deems appropriate to review and bring to the attention of the Executive Council. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is held under the Public Inquiries Act, which basically means that you have all the powers of a judge, and you can make it very formal, and people are sworn, and produce documents and subpoenas, and you can ask people to present their briefs in advance and everything like that. I'm a great believer that just because you've been given some power and authority doesn't mean you have to use it. So my style has been entirely different. And my style has been, I want to go into, it's going to turn out to 15. I thought 14, but it's now going to be 15 because we're going to do a second one in Charlottetown. 15 meetings all across the province. And taking next week off because of March break. And a couple more folks are coming in. And then on Monday, April the 25th, going to be at North Rustico. The following night is going to be in Murray Harbor. And then on April the 8th, we're going to be in Charlottetown at the Rod Hotel again with a storm date of the 15th. And then the next night, we're going to be in Crapo. Everyone wants to know when the Crapo meeting's coming. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but anyway, Crapo meeting's going to be the next night with a storm date of Wednesday the 10th. And then we're going to Wellington, that's Saturday afternoon, the 13th. And so that'll be the 15 meetings. And we're getting submissions all the time, email and dropping them in, written briefs and so forth. And people are asking me when the cutoff for that is going to be. And it's going to be around the middle of April. And then I have to do some work and a fair bit of work and analysis. This is not sort of like an election. If it was an election, then we would simply have had a plebiscite across the province. And so you tally up who's against this and who's in favor of this and so forth. That's not how it works. The government is expecting me to do an analysis of the situation and so forth. Now, when this statute was passed in 1982, there was no purpose stated in the statute, but the purpose is right here on page 2. And since we have a fair number who haven't been at any meeting before, I'm going to turn that page and just read it. In 1998, the government today put this in the legislation as the purpose. It's rare for legislation to contain a stated purpose. Normally what judges and lawyers say, the words speak for themselves, so therefore don't try to give it any spin. Well, this is the spin. The purpose of this act is to provide for the regulation of property rights in Prince Edward Island, especially the amount of land that may be held by a person or corporation. This act has been enacted in the recognition that Prince Edward Island faces singular challenges with regard to property rights as a result of several circumstances, including A, historical difficulties with absentee landowners and the consequent problems faced by the inhabitants of Prince Edward Island in governing their own affairs, both public and private. The province's small land area and comparatively high population density unique among the provinces of Canada, and the fragile nature of the province's ecology, environment, and lands, and the resulting need for the exercise of prudent, balanced, and steadfast stewardship to ensure the protection of the province's ecology, environment, and lands. And then the next couple of pages are just duplicates of the little maps here. And I was telling one of the women earlier on that I've been a little surprised and perhaps even disappointed that there hasn't been very much discussion on the matter of non-resident ownership in Prince Edward Island. It just doesn't seem to catch on. And there are some issues connected with that. And then the following last page is just a little bit of a narrative printed into the maps. Now, I decided to put on a green sweater tonight because I thought I was going into the heart of Irish Prince Edward Island, and with the possible exception of Monaghan Road and Fort Augustus, which I had the distinct pleasure to represent for 3 terms in the legislature, I think we couldn't get a more Irish set of folks than around there. And so it's close to St. Patrick's, so I decided, and you notice the meeting has been held on the 14th of March, which happens to be my favorite number, as opposed to tomorrow, which is the Ides of March. I thought we'd just leave that alone for the Romans, take care of that. Anyway, I have enjoyed all of these meetings. I've got to know people that I haven't seen again, I haven't seen in some time, people I've met for the first time. And my style is to try to come a little bit early, to stay as late after the meeting as anybody wants to talk to me. And Kensington was a late night, but that's fine. It was also a good meeting too. So, welcome, and who is going to be someone that would like to make some comments? It's always hard to get the first comment. Urban.
On the fight, I'm just taking off my coat. Had a task it's Tuesday this week, so we're all prepared. We're first time leaving.
Could you just repeat what you said? I thought I heard you say, what did you say earlier in the week?
So we just bought her 2 caskets.
That's what I thought you said.
Trying to beat the HSB.
$700 each, so the whole thing, there's nothing left to do for the reception. We don't have any coming.
Urban, I plan on a big crowd.
So all we have to do is allow the people to pray in the morning. Rest is done.
Will there be a lunch, Urban?
Oh, yes.
I'll go
At
then.
least 100 each time. Whatever it takes. Anyway,
Nice to have you.
well, thank you very much, You're a legal person, and now on the outside, you're staying in the cabinet.
Which I have to tell you on that very point is that Angus McLean, who represented this constituency for a long time, he used to always get into these various discussions in cabinet. He would be smoking a pipe, and then he'd look at me and he'd say, you know, Horace, I'm not a lawyer, but, and I just held my breath to see what the but was. Because it didn't make any difference whether your legal background, he, like you, understands to be able to read the law. Sorry to interrupt you, carry on.
We're fortunate that you allowed yourself to be continue on your work, really, as founding examiner of the Land Protection Act. And you're drawn like a moth to a flame. There's no action that you applied for the job because you felt like you're part of it. As I felt like I'm part of it, still 81 years of age. Probably need some farmers tonight. You know, my brother told me, Harry used to help us with hay. He said, why don't you just let it go? He said, put your feet up. And I said, once you're a farmer, it never leaves you. I still suffer from haying time. I suffer through potato time. I suffer through grain time, soybean time. It never leaves you. So that's really why I'm here. I'm drawn to go off to the flame and understand why you're drawn. Now, this is a little bit different than a legal case. Most of the time, my experience with the legal profession, in fact, the second time I visited my lawyer, I told him I don't have to send you the bill for legal expenses. So, I hope I don't have to send you a bill for legal expenses. Well, I just wish you would have paid your Summerside, and I'm not expecting a check in the mail or anything like that.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
Anyway, it's when I had my experience with court, we took the government to court, tried to save sugar from the amalgamation. We lost the case, we knew we would. Because they went in the City of Summerside Act, and we went on the municipality sample where you have to ask for the amalgamated. So it's better gloved than lost than never gloved at all. So that's the figures that we're operating on. But the legal business now, oftentimes, I found that courts aren't about justice. They're usually about law more than they are about justice, although they are sometimes they need to. But there's a weighing of this and a weighing of that. When you exercise the principle of the Land Protection Act, you don't compromise on principle. I refer you to the 10 Commandments. They're older than the Land Protection Act. Which ones are we going to rearrange the furniture on?
Well, I've said a couple of times to people, not necessarily in the meeting, you know, we must remember that this is not the 10 Commandments, and I'm not Moses, and we have to remember what Moses did. He simply went up the mountain, and God did the writing, passed the tablets, took them down.
Who was the commissioner?
I don't think they had the commissioner at that time.
265 hopes later.
Yeah.
I refer you to somebody building the land, trying to maintain the Land Protection Act on the rock. So, this is not a popularity contest. I think we mentioned that in Kensington. And this is, everybody, probably all the people have difference of opinion what is right. But this refers to what is right more than a popularity contest. Remember there in Kensington, there's one farmer, he's the 7th generation. And he was the lone son, and the father had to exercise of passing the farm on to the sons, which wouldn't be as painful as as having to sell the land. It goes back probably 150 years or more. That's more painful than not being able to buy more land. Of the lesser of the two, having to sell the farm would be much more painful than trying to buy more land. He must be doing something right because his two sons working with him. So give him credit for being a manager. But now we have a situation whereby the younger farmers, well, way back over 40 years ago, we were called all kinds of names, and communists and leftists and everything else, because we dared to talk about a marketing system for potatoes. But quotas, no, I want to do how I want to, when I want to, how I want to. But the only one they listen to is not all of that, but some. Mother Nature steps in, puts on a quota, usually the price goes up. Maybe they're getting the cost of production for a change, which includes return on labor and investment. I think the three banks, what did they make, $1.3 billion in 3 months? Can you imagine the farmers, this company made $1.3 billion in 3 months, like 3 or 4 of them? Well, that flood last night, the Tongue River, that'd be mild, with all due respect. So we have to have our priorities in the right place. We're going to own our land, we're stewards of our land. That's the ones in Plan B down there at Churchill. They're hemlock trees. How much they own when the crunch comes? I was at a meeting last Sunday afternoon, you probably saw in the paper, the speaker from Cambodia was here. And they valued their trees. I think they shipped a tree from another country, a whole tree, $30,000. What would they say is Plan B, rearranging the landscape that the money is created? And this is more than satisfying contractors, maybe the political strife. This is as serious as it gets. It may not be the 10 Commandments, but it's the commandment that the future printed it on, respect the land, ownership and use. So, I think that's my opening statement.
I think it's too early to determine the evening when your closing one will be, but we'll just carry on. Right now you're not going to make any more comments now, are we?
I'll just give you a chance probably to get my breath here.
Well,
I think I covered the, okay, yes, I think I do something else.
All right.
I don't imagine you jumped for joy whenever the time to change the act from 1,000 acres to just be arable land and not include all the land. That wasn't the principle that you brought in by 1982. That's one of the principles that's been violated. Now what that means is 1,200 acres, 1,400 acres now, instead of 1,000. And now we got, instead of 3,000, we got 4,200. But then Judge Thompson seconded the motion that the cabinet had already established. And I suspect, now I hear tell, it could be wrong, but I think we'd have to have a land, they could drive through Spring Valley sometime, take a look at the signs. I have a feeling that there are some farmers who, knowingly or unknowingly, are a front for some of the large processors in this province. So I think that could be examined to see how many acres of land has fallen through the cracks there. I don't know who's who in this room, and I don't very much care. I'm just stating as it is. And what I hear now, if you prove me wrong, or your findings find it otherwise, I'll be the first one to congratulate you. So now we got woodland. Oh, it falls down anyway. It's on the news tonight. Falls down. So what if it falls down? And it's known to rot and deteriorate. Sometimes the woodpecker doesn't have to work as hard, and a few other animals. So, nature, well, that's the violation of nature. Most farmers will know that and tell you that, the better it is. So you have to keep that in mind too, that the principle already, now we want more land. Well, it seems to me it's time we looked at why do we need more land? Why are we looking at just like me taking Tylenol, a terminal injury, or illness, or a serious illness. Well, take 3 or 4 Tylenol, go to bed, you'll be all right. This needs more than Tylenol. This can still be saved, and you have a great opportunity to leave a great legacy that you've already built on, long after you're now gone. I don't want to rush brush you off and the sunset early either. But
I haven't bought my basket yet.
oh, you don't think of those things for a while, but do so. You never know. Line back to Charlottetown. Tony's good, doesn't matter how old you are. Look, that's the poor woman up west there, 42, 49. So many people are affected by that. So wear your seatbelts, and I'm not getting paid to say that either, but I don't like putting them on. But I had an accident one time. No seatbelts in those days. Down in Weeks' Garage Corner, 50 feet from the tail, 3 feet. I landed between the post and Smith block, age 35 and 31 at the time. Joined in a few the following year. I guess we're safe or something. So I went to Dr. Ellis's a farewell party, 43 years in the business. I said, I didn't intend to go to you. I said, 8th year you're in business. I said, I didn't intend to go to you that night either. But they took us down to Hunter River. And we checked us out. And anyway, we're cleared. So we survived that one. So every day is a bonus after that. So that's why you got to make the most of your time.
That's true. Every day is a bonus.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll hear from some others, and if you later in the evening, we'll,
Just to get it started.
if we shorten time, filler, we'll call upon you back.
Thank you. There's not take leaving the coat here.
Thank you, Irvin.
Very welcome now.
For comments, Leonard, do you want to go over here? Okay. 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 I think we can hear you.
I'm not charging anybody for my heat.
All right.
Oh, but the legislation, the way it is, has been in place this long. I believe that the levels should be raised for what we have. I mean, corporations have got bigger, or farmers have got bigger, and it does take more land to make a profit and to try to rotate land and what have you with other crops that are now becoming available with new varieties of seed and new markets. So I think there is a place to have it increased. I don't know just quite how much. I would think at least half of what it is again would be a starting point.
So you're saying from 1,000 to 1,500, and then from 3,000 to 4,500. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that would be.
I can't hear, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Leonard is saying that he thinks that the time has come to raise the limits, and he's suggesting 1,000 acres to 1,500, and from 3,000 up by 50% to 4,500.
Right.
Now, are you able to provide any specific evidence or empirical evidence or knowledge or facts other than just simply indicating that you need more land to make more of a profit or to make a profit?
No, it's just from my own experience of running a farm and what have you, and seeing what acres we're producing on and what have you, and talking to other farmers, you know, that's the feedback that I get also.
Okay.
20 years ago, a family could make a living on 125, 150 acres of potatoes. That's impossible today. A family needs to be growing 300 or 400 acres to make a living. So if you got a father and two sons, or you have 3 brothers that want to farm together, someone's going to have to leave.
Sorry.
The land basis.
I didn't have an opportunity to meet you beforehand. And your name?
Greg McKenna.
Great. And are you in the farming business?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And is you and your sons or
Yep.
brothers? Okay. And how many acres would you grow?
We can double our acreage, but we don't have the land.
You have.
In the future, we'll have to, because I have grandsons coming on now.
And where does crop rotation fit in all of this story?
It should be kept on the 3-year rotation.
Okay. And When we were at the Montague meeting, there was indication there that approximately 75% of farmers are honoring crop rotation, so therefore 25% are not. How do you make sure that crop rotation is honored?
I think that's up to the farmer himself.
Eventually, he's going to, if somebody's not honoring a rotation of at least 3 years, then, you know, it's going to be, with the soils that we're dealing with here on most of the island, they're not going to be in business in 20 years, you know? I mean, you can't treat soils and rotate potatoes that quickly, or even corn. And if you're not rotating crops, the soil's not going to hold up. You're not going to get the yields it needs. Now, it's unfortunate. I've seen land where this has gone on for quite a while, and the land has come up for sale where nobody wanted to buy it because in the community, because everybody knew what it was like.
I think for the most part, everybody's catching on that the 2-year rotation is not putting money in your pocket, it's costing you money.
Yeah. In the long run, it's not sustainable. It may take some people longer to find that out than others, but
Well, in their process of taking more time to find it out, the land gets hurt.
that's right. But it can be brought back eventually.
No, it can't. I'm the poor schmuck that had to buy the bad land, and I'll tell you. Land, the best way to fix a farm is don't ruin it in the first place.
Well, that's right. No, I would agree 100%.
And I disagree with you on that. I think the 3-year rotation legislation is there, and there's got to be some way to bring the hammer down, period.
Now, we're going to hear from you a little later, Peter. I've gotten to know some of you. I want this conversation up here to take its natural course.
Why do we figure that the corporation should have 4,500 acres? There's lots of goddamn young fellas that like to farm, and they don't need another ounce of land, as far as I'm concerned. You put that in your book, if you want it.
Well, when I put it in my book, whose name do I put?
Lewis Hamill, Middleton, 1148 1A.
It was the first time I got an address, but anyway, that's fine.
In case you want to send me a letter. Another thing, the last time you took in lost, you might as well, nobody ever, they beat them every time.
I'm sorry, the last time
The
what?
last time they took in legislation with acres,
Yes?
that's been beat so many times, it's not funny. There's roundabout, how to get around it. It's near time, if we're gonna do anything, put some goddamn teeth in it and let's live up to it.
Well, that topic is a little bit of a complicated story, in my opinion. We live in a free and democratic society. We elect people to go to the legislature, pass laws, and so forth. And then when the laws are passed, when people come to my office as a client, there's 2 things that I never hear of when they come into my office. They don't tell any lawyer jokes. All the lawyer jokes are told outside. Second thing is, nobody says, I want to find a loophole. What they do is they say to me, this is my fact situation. You know the law. You help and provide options and choices for me how to deal with the law. And I know there's been a lot of talk about loopholes and this and that and everything else, but you know, we're all trying to live together. We're all trying to live together in this island that has very unique and very special place. I had to be outside the province the other day. There was my wife needed some medical appointments, so we're outside the province, and they turned out to be good news. And we went into this restaurant in the evening, and here, sitting in the restaurant, I couldn't believe it, were 2 retired senior public servants of Prince Edward Island with their wives. And couldn't believe it. You go away from Charlottetown, and they're anyway. So I went over to say hello to them, and one of them says, "How are the meetings going?" I said, "Oh, they're very interesting, getting good attendance and lots of comments." And the person said, "Are they going the way you thought?" And I said, "Well, you know, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It's just I didn't appreciate how hard it was going to be." And what do I mean by that? My, there are varied opinions out there. an awful lot of strongly held opinions. And yet, I personally do believe that there is a difference how a non-resident views the land in Prince Edward Island than a resident views the land. Just like I look upon this, and one of my disappointments in this meeting so far is we've had next to no discussion on that map or anything pertaining to it whatsoever. Okay? Now, I'm only a human being, now, despite all the kind things that Urban said about me. Okay? But the reality is, I need people to express themselves honestly. I need to produce facts, if at all possible, because what you need to do is think for a moment about you being where I am and I where you are. Okay? And somewhere along the line, in the last 20 plus years, positions have become hardened on this legislation that they never used to be. And I don't know how that happened. And I'm not sure that I have the capacity, because I'm not Moses, to undo what happened the past 20 years. But one of the things that I really appreciated in these meetings is people speaking their mind. And I have been told that some of you speak and you're not accustomed to public speaking. And I've listened to lots of comments afterwards. But you know, one of the comments that really struck me in the last couple of meetings, after the meeting was over, were these. And then I'll be quiet and let you guys carry on a little bit, is a couple of young farmers are telling me they can't find any land to rent. They can't find any land to rent. And they can't work out arrangements with their neighbors. What? We're all in this together. I'm a guy that doesn't own 1 acre of land. Not even a square foot, and I don't own a share in any company that does. My wife owns half an acre of land in Charlottetown. That's where her home is. Incidentally, it's on land that used to belong to John Hampton Gray. Our house is in the garden of the premier who chaired the 1864 conference. Okay, that's where we live. Okay, but how could it possibly be that when we were crying for farmers to feed us, that I hear young farmers telling me that they haven't got any available land to rent. And they can't work out arrangements with their neighbors. There's something wrong with that, guys. There's something terribly wrong with it. And at the Kensington meeting, I said 2 things. I showed my hand a little bit. There are going to be at least 2 things I guarantee it's going to be in this report. One is land banking. I am a firm supporter of government getting back involved in land banking. Second thing is, we need to protect some viewpoints and vistas in this province if we're truly to appreciate and maintain the rural character of Prince Edward Island. It just has to be. Now, I told some of you that when I drive along the road, I think, as we were driving along the road going to see these doctors outside the province, my wife looks over to me and she says, "What page of the report have you written so far?" Because I'm thinking about these types of things. And it wasn't 5 miles later, then a half-ton truck passed us, and the back sticker on it was "Farmers Feed Cities." Okay. And some of you think that I am the cure-all and end-all for all the problems that ever existed. I got news for you. I can't do it. If I had a magical wand, and if I lived in a benevolent dictatorship, of which I was the dictator, and I could tax you as much as I possibly could and redirected all the wealth, then I could do it. But we don't live in that type of society. That's not the type of society that we have opted for as citizens. However, it ought to be possible that if we value this land, that we can ask some basic questions. What is good for the land? What is good for farmers? They have to be able to survive. And what is good for our neighbors? I came awful close to bringing a ginger beer bottle today, but I decided maybe I wouldn't. Okay. The ginger beer bottle is an opaque bottle and you can't see in it. And for a lawyer, it is probably the most important symbol of the law of negligence, because it was an English case in which the manufacturer of this ginger beer bottle, we had the first introduction of what we call tort or negligence law in the British Empire. And before that, it said that the manufacturer didn't have to worry about how he made the ginger beer, because he just sold it to the wholesaler. He didn't have an obligation to go down the line to the consumer. And this poor consumer opened the ginger beer bottle, and there was a decomposed snail in there, and got sick, and sued the manufacturer. And the court said, yes, we do have an obligation from here, way down here. And they went on the doctrine of what is a neighbor. Okay? And we have obligations to our neighbors. And I need some of your help how to do that. It has been suggested to me in another meeting, and that person isn't here tonight, that there is no obligation among farmers in regards honoring of crop rotation. I disagree. I think that there is an obligation upon all of us to make sure that crop rotation works. The suggestion had been made that it should be up to the law enforcement people to enforce crop rotation. Well, that has a role, but surely we need to have education, we need to have incentives, that we don't have to be calling upon the crop regulators. Angus MacLean, and this will conclude, if you know me, if you want to know how I think, read Angus MacLean's memoirs. I was one of the proofreaders. But he was Minister of Fisheries during the entire time of the Diefenbaker government. And it came along to make a promotion for a senior person in the Department of Fisheries doing something. And so they brought the names along. And this particular person, his best track record was because he had caught so many poachers. He caught all these poachers. He caught more poachers in his fishing district than any other fishing district. So therefore, the department recommended he should get a big promotion. And so Angus says, well, what about these fellows? They didn't catch any poachers at all. In fact, there were no poachers going on in his constituency whatsoever. Angus says, well, wouldn't we promote the one that had so much respect for making sure we didn't poach and hurt the industry? Why would you give to the fellow that couldn't teach by leadership? You see what I'm saying? And so somewhere along the line before this is all over, I want to have some farmers and farm organizations tell me what they think would be good methods of ensuring the crop rotation is honored. Because as Peter Bolger said in O'Leary, what is the best for the land? Okay, Peter, you're on.
Oh, just an observation. I find myself in an awkward position to have to agree with both Randall McFarland and Lewis Hammond.
You know what's going to happen someday.
In reference to,
I think I'll make no comment.
in reference to Leonard's comment about bringing the land back after 20 years of abuse,
Yes.
that may have been relevant when we had a vibrant livestock industry.
Okay.
We've got an extreme lack of natural organic matter now, which limits our ability to bring back land that's had 20 years of immoral use. And like Lewis said, maybe we need some teeth to
Okay, what are the teeth?
do with how you will, but it's got to be done. It's a bigger issue, from my perspective, certainly than land limits, land use, and respect.
Well, there is going to be another body starting to do some work pretty soon about land use and things like that. But one of the things that's become very apparent to me is the importance of crop rotation and how this is tied into what we're talking about here tonight. I just think it's become essential, and it's been quite a learning process for me about some of this parts. Like, I feel I know the Act reasonably well, but there's certain parts that I have learned from you folks about livestock and animals in that regard. And other crop.
Diversity.
Yeah, it's been a very enlightening, and you guys are the ones that have enlightened me.
Well, I don't want to get put in a shallow grave. So I'm going to leave before the meeting is over.
No, don't do that.
But
Everybody knows where you live, Randall.
my name is Randall Affleck.
He's Randall Affleck.
We're identical.
No, I don't think that's so.
What I find is, I think we grow too many acres of potatoes in PEI. It's not sustainable. I get a lot of kids, newcomers to PEI, that come to the farmer's market. I'm at the farmer's market. I'm part of this buy local thing. There's absolutely no money in it. It's pointless. But I do get to meet a lot of interesting people. And there are a lot of new kids that come to PEI, and they can't believe it's so cheap to move here. And there's a whole new generation of people with mobile jobs, online stuff, that are going to move here. PEI is a nice place to live. And we need young people, and they come here and they say, we don't get it. What's the catch? I say, well, the snow is red, the soil is blowing, it gets worse every year. We have the third highest cancer rate in Canada. We have the highest child autism rate in PEI, or in Canada. My teacher's aide in Kinkora told me that. And it all has to do with how we're abusing nature. If there was more organic matter in the land, if there was more rotation, if nature had more of a balance to work with, we wouldn't have the carcinogens, we wouldn't have the soil blowing and stuff like that. But I think because we've lost the hog sector, we've lost the beef sector, or it's going. We haven't lost it, but we've got grizzly remains. There are a lot of unknowns out there. We're tampering with nature quite greatly by maintaining the acreage that we have. Now, for someone to tell me they're not making money at 3,000 acres, I'm making a perfectly good living with 100. So my thing is, who's your bookkeeper? Because, and when you're doing the two ledgers, I mean, let's count how much environmental destruction is going on. What is nature? How is the environment subsidizing you as a farmer? If you can't make money on 3,000 acres, I mean, maybe you better hire me as a consultant, because I think I can either help you make money or tell you to quit, one or the other. But I don't think the island can take much more of what's going on now. The real question we have to ask ourselves is, should PEI be a great big potato processing zone? Because when I was a kid, when I was 4, you go to Summerside, and Water Street in the fall, there'd be 5 boats, 3 at the wharf, 2 waiting offshore to bring all coming for seed potatoes. 110-pound bags. There'd be Massey 33s and rickety old trucks. A line on Water Street to get these seed potatoes, real value added, off the island. And we grew what? When I was back in 67, how many acres did we grow? 40,000? 30,000?
65.
55, thank you. Anyway, the real question in my mind is this sustainable? And I mean, this winter, my farm is covered in dirt. I get it from the west, I get it from the east, and they're all potato farmers, and they all have that soil conservation award in their front yard. Every one of them. It's a mandatory standard issue for all potato farmers to have that. And this is why I'm going to get put in a shallow grave. I think we need to have a real discussion about where we want to go in this province, because a lot of people are quite afraid to speak out. Now, I had a guy show up in my yard. This truck shows up in my yard that I don't recognize, and that is not normal. And this guy gets out of the truck, and I look at him. He's a contract grower. And he looks around. He doesn't know where I am. And I step out of the calf barn, and he steps into the calf barn because he sees me then, and we shoot the shit for 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, what is this guy up to? And somehow, and I don't know how, I got to be the unofficial leader of the opposition. I didn't ask for it, but here I am. But we shoot the shit for about 10 minutes and, talk cows and pigs, and I'm thinking, what's this guy up to? And he looked at me and said, you guys in the farm union, you're going to fight this land limit increase, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, good. He said, me and my family, and I don't know who's in his family, I don't know. But he says, we're contractors, we've had 3 bad years, we're finally getting things turned around, and if I say anything, I'm dead. But I don't want to get bigger. I don't want a bigger contract. But the way things are going with the industry now, you get big or you get out. And the contractors tell you, get bigger or get out. And he says the thing that's keeping them in business is the fact that their contract is not susceptible to being taken away because they've only got so many growers with the land limits. So we up the limits, that means more growers get eliminated. But this guy, and my question is it right that this guy can't go to you or in this room and bring this opinion forward? The guy is terrified that he will get repercussions. And he came to me. He doesn't know me hardly. I didn't think he knew me, but the guy comes to me. And now I'm here. But is it right that guys out there in this business can't even have an opinion?
Well, I have tried to be as open as I possibly can.
Yes, you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I apologize. Your name?
Randall Affleck. Randall McFarland.
3 weeks and 3 days apart.
You guys are going to get me in trouble here with all these inside jokes before the evening board. Well, this is the way I've tried to do it, and I have tried to be as open as I possibly can, come a little early to meeting, meet everybody I can, stay as late as anyone that still wants to talk. And I found that style works reasonably well. There's cards here. You can send me an email, a letter, whatever the case may be. What I am not doing is, and I'll talk to people on the telephone, and I get requests, can I have a private meeting with you? And you have to be a little careful of that, because that can go certain ways. So my style has been, Randall, to come early, stay late, take telephone calls, and encourage people to try to get people in a conversational setting, not to make it too formal, and to be able to appreciate a laugh and story and something like that. When this is all through, I will obviously have to do some analysis and sit down, and it may well be that I'm going to be contacting certain individuals or organizations for additional input that I feel that I need. But that's me taking initiative as opposed to having, because I think if there's one way I can lose credibility is to start encouraging people not to come to meetings and encourage them to have private meetings, because I just don't want to do that. And there isn't a week goes by, Randall, I don't hear that.
By no means. I don't have a problem with your process. I think it's a great process.
Okay. Now, to answer your question, it does concern me what you say, because you're not the first person that said it. You may be the first person who has the courage to say it publicly, but I've already heard it. I've heard it before the first meetings took place. Okay, and that's unfortunate if that's going on out there. But I've run enough elections, and that's way behind me, but I know that sometimes, how will I put it, people hold strong opinions, and some people are afraid of making their opinions known, perhaps, and I can't do anything more than that except provide the vehicle I have for that, okay? But the questions you ask are penetrating questions. You know, how you can have 45 or 50 or 55,000 acres of potatoes when you were a kid, to where not too long ago we had 113, 115,000 acres, and now we're at 89,000. And the other night in Surrey, we had a nice presentation by one of the gentlemen up there, who's very knowledgeable in potatoes, and he is projecting by 2017 that we're going to have 71,000 less acres in all of North America potatoes than we have now. Well, you know, the question that sort of flows from that is, well, if we're going to be having less potato acreage across North America, then perhaps someone can explain to me why, if we went from 55 to 60 to 115 and now we're down to 89, and if we're going to be going less in North America, why that would be a reason for going larger. And I forgot to mention is, don't try to take my questions as any indication of where I'm thinking, because I've spent a lifetime learning how to ask questions. The only two things you can pick up of what I've said tonight is there's going to be something about landscape and land banking. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is ask questions that you people would understand. And if I could achieve one thing, and I'm not so sure I can, but if I could achieve one thing through this process, it would be to have a greater increased understanding by you folks of your neighbor's position and how we can work together over a reasonable period of time so it's better for all. And I think inherently it has to do with how we care for the land and how we provide for young farmers and assist them and all that type of stuff. Okay? Sorry.
I'm with you on that, except I don't have any neighbors left. I mean, I'm just down to the point where I've got contractors in my neighborhood and that's it.
Okay?
And this is where I'm at. And I have a great appreciation for the one set of neighbors I do have left. And we've always been able to work together. But my endemic question here is, this is not sustainable. I mean, can we look at this whole aggregate landholding thing as part of the problem? Because we need more contracts spread out. We need a better diversity of farmers doing a lot of things, and that's not the direction this industry is taking.
Okay, what are your solutions then? Sorry.
Well, I don't know what happened to the seed industry, and potato farmers have a dozen different opinions. I've been trying, I've been asking. But I really think we've lost our way on that. We've lost our marketing advantages in Toronto and places like that. We owned the Toronto market 20 years ago. It was ours to lose, and I think we lost it. Like all Islanders, I've got dozens of cousins in Toronto, and they're always asking me how come they can't buy good potatoes in Toronto. So there are a lot of alternatives, and this all gets done over and over and over again. Greg Donald from the Potato Board spoke to us. All these initiatives have been going for years. But there just doesn't seem to be any follow-through on any of this stuff because, in the end, the big landowners get their way and the big guys get bigger and the small guys that have the initiatives get pushed out.
Well,
and this is deregulation. I mean, if you want the free enterprise and free market, this is what we're going to end up. We're going to end up with one farm and PEI belonging to one company.
Mr. Carver, the soybeans have taken up a lot of the potato land now. It used to be in potatoes. And wheat is a good price too. But what's happening, why neighbors can't buy, the young farmers to the neighbors, is because they usually sell one big block. There's a fellow near our place, he offered $3,000 an acre for 40 acres across the road from him. They wouldn't sell because they're all one block. Sold all the 3 farms in one block. In the old days, one farmer would recognize the close proximity, and they'd be able to deal, see? That's what happened.
but it's
Seems
your,
that the island doesn't want to catch up.
pardon me?
Seems that the rest of the island, the politicians have said they've changed all these regulations and everything else through the taxes and everything else. They want to catch up to the rest of Canada. Like your registration for your cars and snowmobiles, everything's doubled, everything's going up higher because we're catching up with the rest of the maritime. PEI is in the last. I mean, Randall talks about diversification, but what's the sense of growing something if you can't make a product, if you're going behind? You can't make a profit out of it. Getting up in the morning, going to work, same as they did 40 years ago. They get up in the morning, they went to work. Sometimes they made money, sometimes they didn't. They went to work. You can't do that today. You can't get up in the morning and go to work. Because every time you do something, it costs money. So you have to think about what you're doing. And as far as the land rotation thing, the way the act reads right now, I think you can plant 3 cash crops and still be within regulation. I think that has to change.
What are you suggesting?
Well, I think they're going to have to define what is a rotation.
And how would you define it?
Well, some people do 2 years, some people do 2 and 5, some people do 3 or 4. But I mean, on a 3-year rotation, they can do 3 cash crops, and that soil's not getting much of a rest. So I mean, just because it's within the guidelines doesn't mean it's right. They're harvesting from that land every year.
Mining.
Would it be workable to have a minimal amount of organic matter in the soil? Like the province is going around doing testing anyway.
How do you know they don't? You talk about the processors saying that they want 1,000-acre growers. There's lots of 200-acre growers out there that are making a decent living. They're not pushing them to grow. The
Okay.
processors aren't making them grow. They're making a living. They're
But-
happy doing what they're doing.
Regardless of the size though, Derek, I mean, what's their right organic matter? 3%? Something like that?
Depends what you talk to, which soil sample people you talk to.
But would there be any point setting a minimum on that, like a minimum 3%?
Well, that's the same as pH. Years ago, farmers didn't want high pH, and now everybody wants high pH. Because certain pHs, you got to grow certain products, and it was better for the potatoes.
Well, my point is, I mean, if somebody was legislated that you couldn't grow potatoes below 3% organic matter, they'd have to rotate or something. They'd have to fix it.
Yeah, but why is PEI so much smarter than the rest of Canada? I guess that's what I can't understand. For some reason, PEI wants to do everything first. You drive across the bridge, there's a lot less rules, even in your business.
Well,
Like, why is PEI so far ahead of the rest of Canada?
Maybe because we killed our fish and got so many high nitrate wells and a few reasons like that.
Yeah, well, every business, you're gonna have a few bad apples.
But I think we learned from a lot of those problems. Those problems started 30, 40 years ago through
We
ignorance.
killed fish last summer, and we got red snowbanks this winter.
Yeah, that's right.
What did we learn in 30 or 40 years? That's a very good point.
I think the worst thing they did was take the cattle out of the rivers. I think they kept the rivers clean. Now the rivers are all built up and silted and everything else. Every brook is overgrown.
Okay, we're going to hear from the other Randolph.
Well, I mentioned that I think just about everybody in the room would like to see younger farmers, more younger farmers in our community. And in my mind, that's kind of the priority. And I mentioned this at Kensington, so. But I think we need to understand where agriculture has been and where it's going into the future. You made an interesting observation. I've had similar conversations with young farmers about land and access to land. But 100 years ago, it was you had people with virtually no power and farmers without organization and people buying the product as cheap as they could. And then they got organized and formed cooperatives. And then, we buried Eugene Wayland here a couple of weeks ago. And, during that era, the farmers were organized and encouraged to organize in marketing boards, and they were empowered that way. But increasingly around the world, in different commodities, it's at different levels, but we're shifting to contract production. If it's chickens in the United States, or hogs, or dairy in Europe or Australia, it's an arrangement that where we have our access to market is through a contract with a processor or a retailer, and so that's not a very strong position for a producer to be in. In a lot of cases, they're annual contracts. So the rules can change within a year, but you make a commitment on land or buildings or infrastructure, you're tied in for a lot longer than a year. So I say that as a preamble because we need to do some exercises mentally as to where the changes we make, in this next year will take us into the future. Right? And for a young producer, one of my biggest concerns is, and I'll use what I consider the worst case scenario, is to take the limits off the aggregate land holdings, regardless of what your process reports. That's so I just use that. I have no idea what's going to happen, but how is the land going to be reorganized? And I think it'll be reorganized rather quickly. And I think it'll be reorganized by people that have contracts, because that's access to a market and cash flow. And it doesn't have to happen. You know, we've had 30 years where there's been very lackluster economic results on farm. You know, and they haven't. You know, they've chewed into their equity over the past 30 years. So there's not a big nest of money anywhere in the countryside to go out and make big deals. So my concern is that it's not going to be a case where those producers that want to retire and have a viable farm are going to be able to bring in strangers off the street that are keen to farm. If they're young people are not staying on the farm, that's an option. You know, so I think if we have, let's say, 100 contract growers for potatoes today, within 10 years you'll be down to 50, because it just makes logical sense in my mind. You know, nobody wants. You know, the retailers. It doesn't matter if it's ADL trying to sell cheese to a retailer. You're never big enough. You know, they don't want to deal with hundreds of people. They want to deal with a handful of people, and they want to be able to deliver. And you know, that's kind of a market change. But so I guess that's my concern. If we take the limits off, that you know, I think it was Randall made a comment that it forces people to. You know, it makes a smaller grower or landholder more of an option for a market, I guess. And you know, and it will not be, in my view, or like a card game where you're dishing out the cards, and so there's fewer farmers, but everybody gets a share. I think it'll be you know, a much larger. A smaller group of producers controlling that land, and the younger people, you know, we won't deal with our core issue, or my core issue is how do you get young people to have tenure over the land, those deeds where they make the choices on rotation and how things are grown and what's being grown. I mean, that's in public interest. That's absolutely essential in the long run, because we can't let Ranald or anybody be the decider. This is how it needs to be done. This is the proper crop rotation. What he does is the proper crop rotation. We can't accept that. You know, our security and protection of the soil will come from a diverse group of young people, multi-generational, learning from you know, the folks that have done it and made mistakes and know what not to do.
I'm not sure I understood your point a moment ago about crop rotation. What are you advocating there, Randy?
Well, I'm advocating that where we need to go is to have as many people owning land and farming independently, with clear title over the land and clear choice as to how it's going to be done.
But you would also want to have some standards or there of what's acceptable crop rotation, correct? There needs to be some rules and legislative set out, aren't there?
Well, we already have the current.
But you know, I'm been told. I know, but I'm told that 25% of the farmers violate it.
Yeah.
Too high.
Not enforced.
Anyway, this back row here has been the back here. Second, that fellow with the green shirt there, Kenny. You're awful quiet. You were the first person here.
Yeah.
And you're from Third Queens too, and you've lived all over creation.
Morris.
Yes, Rob.
We're talking about young farmers. Every farming operation within an 8-mile radius of where we sit has a young farmer in place to take the farm over. If he's not already running it, he will be running in a very short time. So the young farmers are doing not too bad in this part of the country.
Okay.
Well, I will speak for West Prince. My name is Charlene O'Brien, and my ancestors farmed Glengarry Lot 7 for 150 years, and Griffins are farming the entire community now. There are no young people left in that part of the country, and it is a very grim sight. Our snowbanks are so red it looks like Mars. in the wintertime. I can look out and see 12 summer cottages that are occupied for 8 weeks of the year. They don't care about our farming issues here. So I think your optimism is a little naive.
Well, maybe so, but right around here, most farmers, I'll go with 90% of the farmers, do a very good job of rotation. Basically, a 3-year rotation. Will you agree with me,
Yeah,
Len?
yes, I would.
You
Yes, I
know,
would.
and I don't know how much better you can get than that.
Yeah.
Some is even 4.
I think Mr. McFarland has really tried to point out the elephant in the living room by talking about how people who are or were contract farmers can't show up at a meeting like this. And Mr. McCarver, I think that, you know, we're a small enough island and everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows what's going on behind the scenes in the good old boys clubs and that kind of thing. For you to be aware, and if you're not, find out after tonight how much of this land is being farmed by big producers like Cavendish Farms and Griffin's. It's certainly more than 3,000 acres because there's more than that just on our road that's being farmed by one big conglomerate and paying their help minimum wage to be the farmers that are out of business, that farmed for generations, are having to go to work for them and drive their tractors during digging time for, you know, $10 an hour. That you must be aware of that, and if you're not, come and take a look at West Prince and go to West Isle High School and see what those kids are doing when they graduate. They're not going to go to our university, by the way, because they're heading out west, and they're not coming back.
Yes, but there's a whole lot of reasons why, you know, the people that originally had land don't have it now. I mean, a lot of times, you know, like young people get educated and they're just not going to put up with farming as a hard way of living. If their parents retire and they're not going to do it, they're, you know, naturally they would sell the land to somebody else where they could reap part of their investment. And whoever has the money to buy it are quite able to buy it, and they're entitled to do that up to their land limits and what have you. You know, and this happens all the time. I
They're
mean,
talking about reducing the contract growers by half, not in 10 years, but right away.
Well,
It's right on the horizon, and we're talking about Cavendish Farms.
well, I'm talking over and above that situation altogether. I mean, there's lots of reasons why people are not farming back the way that we did 50 years ago, and that's largely because it's impossible.
Why is that? Why is it impossible?
Like, because some of the people have already said, at the acres you can, in return per acre, it's just not financially feasible.
Why is that?
That's-
How come the old days we grew 6 acres of potatoes, we make money.
Yeah, but I haven't got time to go through the whole economic thing
How
about
much
how
a
that
liter
took
gas,
place.
how much of electricity, how much of the
Yeah, I mean,
We're not
we
spending
can,
$2,600 for a tractor.
we can talk here for a week if we wanted to go cover all that.
We paid $1,460 for a tractor in 1952.
Well,
Still driving its head down at the tractor show. Pawn shop. $1,460.
The other thing is, we have a 3-year land rotation, and I think most farmers in the area will find their production is probably going up a little bit every year. So they have to be doing something right.
now, Greg Donald at the Potato Board says production per acre in PEI is going down, Robert.
Well, I don't think it is in this area, man.
Well, maybe, okay, that's great, glad to hear it. But overall, I think we got a problem. We lost a lot of the livestock and
Oh, I know.
and stuff like
I
that.
know all
Greg
that.
Donald himself is concerned. He says production per acre is going down. So we have a problem here that I want fixed. I don't want to see you guys go to business. That's not where I'm heading with this. But I think we need to work towards something more sustainable. The word sustainable gets tossed around 20 times a day in the news, but they don't know what it means. Sustainable means I want your great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be farming.
Well, I must say, you know, over the years, I've been really impressed by my fellow farmers that farm here, not only in my community, but on the island. I mean, the quick uptake of new technology here is incredibly fast, a lot faster than it is in a lot of places, and people, forget that happens. I mean, and a lot of the farm conferences that we go to are extremely well attended because they have speakers in on various things. They're giving them the up-to-date technology and information on markets and what have you. And in a lot of places, and I have a lot of friends who farm in Western Canada because I've been on a couple of national boards, and they proportionally they don't get anywhere near the level of turnout that we get. I mean, so I really think the farmers here are trying to be as as efficient or as knowledgeable as they can about their industry, and and looking at it from a fellow farmer, I'm pretty proud of them, and I think they're going to augur well to do things sustainably, and I agree with Robert. The majority of them are doing it right.
The other thing, Lynn, they don't have the restrictions in other provinces that we do now. Now, we were at an irrigation meeting today, which is not a good subject in this part of the country either. But anyway.
We'll leave that one alone.
I mean, there's no restrictions.
Yeah, but that's well, you look at the newspapers, and I read some of the Western farm papers and the Ontario farm paper. Both Saskatchewan and Manitoba are they're looking at what we did here, and they are considering putting restrictions on land there. I mean, even on an international basis. I mean, China bought up half of Mozambique, and then finally the government said, no, you're not going to buy any more land here, and then they put in land restrictions. The same has happened in Brazil and Argentina and in Paraguay. I mean, they were buying up all tracts of land. All of a sudden there's ownership, and now it's opened up even locally all the restrictions within corporations in their own country. And so they're now all doing what we already have.
Well, we've done a little bit of looking, Leonard, at some other jurisdictions, and it's not correct for anyone to say that we're the only place that has restrictions, because other people have various restrictions of slightly different nature. We've had everything from the land law shouldn't be touched at all in any regards to where the Land Act should be gone completely. Okay? And some.
Mr. McCarver, do you spend any time in West Prince?
Well, I have been in West Prince. I'm proud of my Scottish heritage, McGregor, but it's just Carver. Yes, I've been up in West Prince. I've been in Alberton. Very few people showed. We were at O'Leary, and we're going to Wellington. And I sort of know...
For the meetings.
For the meetings, and I have spent some other time, not so much in recent years, but there was a time in my life that I spent a fair bit of time, particularly in Second Prince, running the roads. But I was going to say that if there were no land laws at all in Prince Edward Island, I think that this province would be radically different than we have at the present time. Okay? And there are those that think that my debate with the Prime Minister Trudeau and Angus MacLean's involvement in 1980-81 when we made sure that the Charter was amended before it got enacted, that we could control our lands was a mistake. I don't think so. In the recent article, I read this in one of the meetings the other night, but I want to put a different spin on it tonight. In the Globe and Mail business section of February the 25th, it talks about this. It's about New York. International billionaires are forking over tens of millions for New York's latest in ultra high-end living as a hedge against uncertainty, and many are doing it sight unseen. And what Leonard just said is happening in various parts of the world. Excuse me, they call it by different names, but the name that you would recognize it most is called land grabbing, okay? In which people want land and they don't particularly care what they do or use it, they just want it. And, I know that we probably, if I passed the paper, we could all write down 3 or 4 of the wealthiest families in Prince Edward Island, and 90% of us would all have the same names on it. And, and those people, they are wealthy. But as far as the world is concerned, they're not wealthy. They're paupers. Because they're only millionaires. I'm talking billionaires. Big time. Anyway, if I could just carry on. In 2012, in New York, there were 2 condos sold in New York City in 2012, each one for $90 million. Okay? So that's $180 million. All right. Now, some of you are extremely proud of the Lands Protection Act the way it is. You don't want anything changed whatsoever. And there's others that want some changes, and this and that and everything else. It's not my job in this particular situation to defend the status quo or to make promises one way or the other. But if somebody came to my office and I didn't have this job, and they said, we've decided against buying the 2 condos in New York, and here is $180 million. It's put in your trust account, and you are to produce a plan for us of how in the next 2 years we can buy land in Prince Edward Island for $180 million. It would take me, with the greatest respect, less than 2 hours to write up a proposal to show how, over a 2-year period, $180 million could purchase lands in this province without once going to IRAC or Executive Council. Now, there is a difference between what those individuals will do with the land than what you folks will do with the land. Okay? And somewhere along the line, I keep saying I'm trying, but I feel some nights I'm failing. Somewhere along the line, we have to not just hear each other, we need to understand each other more. And we need to walk in other people's shoes and understand each other better. And at the end of the day, when this is all done, I'll make a report, and the government may accept my recommendations. They may not. They may cherry pick or whatever the case may be. But that's it. And I'm going to go back practicing law. Okay, but there are those running around. I'll just get on another little rant. When I finished speaking at the ADEP Council, I went back to my table, and there was a woman there, a city woman, and she just leaned over to me and she said, Horace, what would happen if we had maritime union? Well, I don't know what's going on. Every time I look around, there's somebody putting a piece of paper in front of me, talks about maritime union. There was even a magazine came today, The Office, talked about maritime union. They were predicting Frank McKenna was going to be the new premier for maritime union. Okay, maritime union could be the death knell of anything about regulation of land protection laws in this province, whether you accept them or not. Okay. We have certain benefits because we are a province. It mightn't make any sense that we're a province to a lot of people, but we're a province. And the day that we decide to pass that constitutional authority up, then the people that vote for that, as far as I'm concerned, they can have the comeuppance of what that produces. Okay. Now, she's one of my most faithful attenders to these meetings, and she sometimes doesn't even speak. But I did see a little finger, Bertha.
Well, when you mentioned, understanding each other better, I just sort of felt compelled to speak a little bit about the Griffins, whom I don't really know. But just because it was sort of left on the table that, they were large and maybe other farmers had been put out of business and now other farmers had to drive their tractors and do it for $10 an hour. I just wanted to give a little perspective. I guess maybe I feel like the Griffins in Graham's Road because my husband and I have farmed there for over 30 years, and we grow between 500 and 600 acres of potatoes, but we also have a dairy herd and a small beef lot. And so, over the years, we've been approached by our neighbors too, as they wanted to retire, and not just neighbors, people that own a bit of land. Would you farm it for us? Would you keep it broken up? And we've gotten to the point where we can't take on any more land, obviously. So it didn't happen that we put these other people out of business by any means. It was a process where people in the community got to an age where they wanted to. And I just think that it's unfair to leave it looking like the Griffins, who are economic generators.
Then how about a survey?
I would.
How about a survey to ask?
Finish.
Carry on, Griffin.
They are economic generators. I mean, in our operation, I probably do 25 T4 slips in the run of the year for all the people we employ. And yes, farm wages aren't the best. It's unfortunate we don't pay more. We certainly pay more than $10 an hour, but it's really unfortunate we can't pay our people more. But I just think it's wrong to leave that on the table the way it's been said, because those two gentlemen have contributed a lot. They've served on the agricultural boards. We've toured their operation when people want to see through a packing shed. And I think that, the other side needs to be aired, and I guess I feel that, yes, certainly diversification has helped in our operation. The comments about the manure and crop rotation. And Horace, to answer your question about why we might get smaller, I think as we start to grow soybeans and so on, we may need to move to a 4-year crop rotation.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put that on the table in an effort to have better understanding.
Thank you.
So can I rebut that now?
Well, I don't know if you can rebut, but you can make comments.
Well, I put it on the table, and I think that it deserves consideration. I'm asking, why even bother with making new additional laws on these land use limits when the ones that are already there are not being observed? And as far as the crop rotation goes, you can come up to my end of the island and see it everywhere where there's only a 2-year crop rotation, and it probably is a lot more than 25%. So if I throw something like that out there and someone feels that they need to defend it, then my next answer to that is, well, then come and see. This island is not all that big, and there are not all that many farms. And if you're taking months and months to go to all these meetings, why not get out there and survey some of these properties and the people that are running them and that kind of thing, and get some numbers together, and not just 14 different opinions in the room.
Excuse me, but the government already has the numbers. We have to report our land holdings every year. So the numbers are there.
I hope you get a good mark tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Robert.
The numbers are there, because we have to report our holdings every year.
Mm-hmm.
To
IRAC.
And what our rotation is and this, that, and whatever now. Well, I shouldn't say we have our rotation, but the numbers are there.
Okay.
So whatever.
And
just one more thing. Unlike Bertha, we never went looking to buy a piece of land in our lives. The neighbors always came to us.
Question that.
Yeah, but the majority of cases that's what's happening. And I agree with Bertha there. Bertha is right. I mean, there are probably 50 or 100 Griffins in the same in that different areas of the island where they tended to be the farmers that stayed there and became larger, and people will naturally go to them to sell, and that's not their fault. I mean, they still have to live within the land limits.
They're not living in Midland, Fred, or land.
No, they still have to live within the land limits.
I realize that.
Lots
of ways around it.
No, there's not. Not a lot of ways around it. There's a few, but I mean, they may own so much land and they may be able to rent some, but if they're farming it, it's got to be done or it's illegal.
David Lang.
getting back to the controls, I don't know. I was really taken back Sunday and talked to a fellow neighbor who works with Kevin's Farms. And he named off several farmers that Kevin's Farms have taken over this just recently. They, like Bertocam would say, we're supplying great product and everything. Supplying the product to the Kevin's Farms, sure. But anyway, what he told me is that they are taking over Big Irvin's, Kevin's Farms, because they went to the wall financially. And it's surprising. See, some of these were big, good growers 10 years ago. And I haven't got all his names, but I could get them in my head. But I was really taken back. That's happening. And they still continue to farm in their name like they always did. But we supply you all the inputs and everything. Yeah.
So the producer, the processor becomes like the banker.
The
Yes.
producer is just a serf. So,
The title doesn't change, but Cavendish Agri Credit holds the title, so the landowner is still Joe what's-his-name. And Cavendish Agri Services holds the note. And I mean, but it's basically the company store, it's the coal mine in Cape Breton kind of thing.
Well, they perhaps hold a note. They can't hold a mortgage because a mortgage, private mortgage, held outside of financial institution like a co-op or a credit union has to receive the approval through IRAC and executive council. That was a part of the law that I can't see the face, but I think I recognize the hand. Edith Ling.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, they may not hold a note, but they hold the control. And I know of a farmer in that situation, he's getting a cent a pound for every pound he delivers to Cavendish Farms. And that's probably okay right now. They supply all the inputs and all. When they get a few of you potato farmers into that kind of situation, you'll hear the sob story. Oh, the French fry market is poor. Our costs have gone up. We can't afford to pay any more than a half a cent. And on, down it'll go. You have to see what's going to happen in this situation. I think it's quite serious, really. And I have a question for people that are talking about crop rotations. Are you including hay in the 3-year crop rotations? Well, that's good. I think that should be mandatory because that's the only thing that will give the land a little bit of a rest. And 3 years is none too. It's pretty short. And I'm sitting here thinking, we're talking about what farming used to be, and the lady there talking about the Griffins, and all those people that couldn't afford to farm or continue farming or got out because they were of retirement age.
Or because their contracts were taken from by Cavendish Farms,
I know
showing up in a community.
Yeah, I know that happens. There's people that are afraid to go to farm meetings. They're intimidated just because they might lose their contract.
Company stores, he said.
But I'm just thinking, we're going all the way around the bush here. If we were getting paid for what we're doing, you wouldn't be a land commissioner. We wouldn't be attending these meetings about the land. Because if farmers were getting paid, the limits we have now would be more than sufficient. Maybe you could even reduce them and then make it a lot easier for young farmers and diversification, especially the young new farmers, to get into the business. And when we're setting up large blocks of land, we're just playing right into the hands of the land grabbers. And it's no wonder that the western provinces are looking at similar legislation to what we have, because there's millions and millions of acres in the west being grabbed using pension funds and whatever else.
That's a good point. Land grabber doesn't have to come from China. A land grabber can come from over across.
That's right.
And the other thing I've heard, this is going to be an ongoing process, you know, where there's going to be requests coming forward. I've heard someone say that, you know, the land limits need to be increased, and then in 2 or 3 years' time, we need to look at it again. They have to happen again. Well, folks, where is it going to stop? If we started, where does it stop? Like I said, I think it's best to be left alone.
I guess my question is, does everybody's public perception is that if these land limits are raised, do they think they're gonna go into potatoes? Is that the problem? That seems to be the public perception. As soon as you raise the limits, we're gonna grow more potatoes.
They cut the trees down, that's what they did.
Well, no, some fellows they did whatever they did with the land. But I mean, the market's only gonna allow whatever they can buy. If somebody wants to raise the land limits more, it doesn't mean you're gonna go out and buy 1,000 more acres and grow more potatoes, because you'll go broke. The farmers today are trying to grow more hundredweight in less acres, like Leonard said with the technology. We wanna grow more product on less acres. And Cavendish Farms is helping in that aspect. But it seems to be public perception is we want to grow more acres. Well, who's going to buy them? We can only have so many coffee shops. You can't put a coffee shop in every corner.
Well, where's the push for this coming from then?
For
increasing limits? Who's pushing it?
for family farms. Doesn't have to be corporate farms.
No, but where's the push coming from?
On our road alone, in North Quebec, there's at least over 10 or 12 farms on our road. We're the last one left. And like everybody says, we didn't go after them. They gave us approaches, we bought land. But where would that land go? Where would that person go if they didn't get to sell their land? It's like a milk quota. They use the milk quota as a retirement. Our land is our retirement. And if they wanted to grow, if they wanted to milk more cows, they could ask permission to milk more cows. They're not just gonna go get 20 or 30 more head and milk more cows because I want to grow. They gotta ask to get the milk quota. It's the same thing.
And another thing too, farm safety is getting to be a very huge issue. The McDonald's, the Burger Kings, the Sobeys, the Loblaws, they're pushing farm safety in a huge way. They don't want to see their product that they're selling coming from 40-run farms. And there's a lot of people don't realize what we have to do to accommodate that. And 3-year rotation is slowly becoming a part of it. So the Cavendish farms of the world are not going to deal with people who are not abiding by the rules and who are not environmentally friendly. And that's slowly coming in. So we as potato farmers, we have a black eye from everyone that doesn't grow potatoes. We have to do a good job of what we're doing. And we have to make sure that we're going to be around for our sons and our grandsons. Because if we're not doing a good job, the Cavendish farms, the ADLs of the world, they don't want us.
If you're too small, they don't want to deal with you, they'll cut you off and go for the bigger farm.
Depends on what you are.
That's what they do.
It's just like the lobster now, that's on the news the other day, PEI has to spend $250,000 to get certified. Or they're gonna be not selling to the big buyers.
That's why it's wrong to have a price of milk quota, Mr. Chairman. Because we were against that from the very beginning. We had supply management and dairy. Oh, now we're dealing with China. And now we're dealing with overseas Europe. That's a great place to deal right now. We're not going to deal with, we're not going to give up supply management, says Mr. Carver. We're just going to take more imports in gradually, bit by bit, and we'll suffocate by degrees. That's what the plan is. They don't need Quebec and the Maritimes anymore for the next election, I think. So that's what's going on now. And I sympathize with Mr. Chairman, Mr. Carver, Commissioner, because it's going to be hard for you to separate your legal hat from your what's best for the long-term benefits of the farmers of this province and the people of this province. I heard one person say, the meeting intention, the people in the city aren't concerned. They're not. It's not in it for them. Nothing in it for them. Excuse me, they're involved too. They're involved big time. They just don't know that yet.
Yeah.
Some of them don't know that yet. So I've dealt a long time. And in price of milk quota, that's why young farmers, whenever the price of milk quota came back in 1981, November the 1st, we had 974 dairy farmers in this province. Now we get 120. It costs you $25,000 for a cow, to right to milk a cow. $2,000 cow or $3,000 cow. And you have to, and now they're getting out, the young farmers 35 and 40, they're getting out, take the money and run. In case the price of quota goes down, and price it'll be gone altogether once they deal with Europe. So that's what's going on. That's a big issue there too. So
Well, Urban,
that's what's wrong with the fishermen too. The price and their quotas. That's what's killing them too. So the young farmers can't come in unless they succeed their fathers.
Urban, every single day, I never have a coffee and I never have a tea, but I have 2 or 3 glasses of milk. Margaret?
Only 3?
Well, I know. It's a little hefty, but anyway. Margaret?
Mr. Carver, are you having or have had meetings with the Federation of Laborers or the Federation of Agriculture separate or the Potato Marketing Board?
No.
The reason I'm asking those questions is I have been at, this is the 3rd meeting I have been at.
Yes, I know.
You're aware. And I was going to be quiet.
Sorry?
But I live next to 2 fairly big farmers. One employs about 55 employees. The other one, he has his own markets now. He has a major problem. There's 4 families involved in that operation. He has a major problem in that he has potato board. He has publicly said, and some people will guess who it is, one of them have publicly said, one of the family members, have publicly said that they want to buy more land and they were pleased these hearings were going forward. You might guess who it is too. The other farmer employs about 30-some employees over the course of the whatchamacallit. But I have not seen either of those families or the farmers here. And I know they would want to have input, and this is why I'm questioning this fact.
Well, as you know, Margaret, you were at the Summerside meeting.
Yeah, I was at the Summerside
We had,
meeting.
I think, 10 people, and at the Kensington meeting, we had probably 35 plus. And tonight, I think we got 35 plus. And no, I have not met separately with, I gave you my little spiel earlier, and I spoke to the, well, I suppose I met in the sense I spoke to the Federation of Agriculture at the luncheon, and then I am meeting with the NFU at their annual meeting. I believe it's now on April the 11th, and they kindly shifted it so I can spend Easter Monday in Calgary with my wife and grandkids. And it's my understanding that haven't sort of settled it out yet, but I have already received a brief from the Federation and the NFU, which is well written. And I believe that they're going to be either at North Rustico or Charlottetown, and that the Federation of Agriculture is probably going to be at Charlottetown, and that the Potato Board is probably going to be at Crapo. And then we're hearing from several other groups that are going to be present as well. So that's the story on that. And yes, I have been surprised at some of the meetings who hasn't been there, but I can't do that.
I know in the case of the one that has 55 employees, that there is at least 3 other family members coming into the business.
Yes.
And they're all going to want to buy land or the business will not sustain that number of family members. Now, it's really nice to see family members coming into and young people being involved in agriculture. And that's what we need, because like it or lump it, agriculture is the backbone of PEI. And if the farmers don't make money, nobody else makes money. So that's why I feel these meetings are so important.
Well, it was, shall I say, my firm decision that there were going to be quite a few meetings. There were some that suggested that could only have half a dozen, but I said no, and I actually picked the sites myself. And I was thinking as I was driving up the Kinkora Road this evening that no one should really be able to say that they didn't have an opportunity.
That's right. That's true. That's fair. Yeah.
And I'm going right into down to Murray Harbour.
One end of the other.
But they don't go quiet from now on.
It's all right. That's it.
Has there been any discussion at any of the meetings? I'm kind of going to sidetrack it from the farming thing because
I think that's taken up a lot of your time here, but I'm concerned about that too. But real estate investment firms, as you'd mentioned before, are starting to buy up large tracts of land in Alberta and especially southern Ontario with good farmland, because cities are built around wonderful farmland because of the deltas and everything else. Has there been any thought put into that from ownership, say, because a lot of people are, don't want to buy stocks in P&G or anybody else, so land is always going to be valuable. So now they're starting to realize there are real estate investment firms putting money into land grab and land holdings. And has there been any thought as to limiting them or restrictions or anything of that nature?
Okay, and I see a little ring there.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Andrew McCardle.
I sort of concluded that you perhaps looked like the gentleman next door, but I wasn't even going to raise this, but such an inviting opportunity. I have tossed this out at almost every meeting, and it really hasn't gone anywhere. And when it goes anywhere, it usually goes in a direction differently than I think it would go. Which is, if we're truly interested in the land, then are we not really therefore interested in how the land is cared for and how it's treated? Okay? And one of the things that's difficult in all of this discussion, because you don't have to go down too far on that type of discussion these days to come up with the word potatoes, and then you get into strong opinions and so forth. And it has been an education for me. Maybe I need to give you a bit of my background. My ancestors, the Carvers, came here in 1783. They were involved in a minor military skirmish south of the border, and they lost. They came north. And except for one chap who was a sea captain for a very few years, and then he farmed the rest of his life, all of the people in the Carver direct line down, male, have been farmers. I'm the first non-farmer. Okay? And my great-great-grandfather was a tenant farmer for over 50 or 60 years, and he didn't get a deed for his property until he was almost 90. And you can say that's a long time ago, except that my grandfather Carver lived to be 101, and my grandfather knew his grandfather, and that's the man we're talking about being a tenant farmer, okay? I'm the oldest of 5 sons. I have no sisters. Urban, my youngest brother, died of a massive heart attack a year ago in Moncton, just like that, gone, age 50. So life is uncertain, okay? My parents decided that they would give basically farming up in the early 70s because they didn't want to go into debt, and they rented the land out and all that type of stuff, and so forth. But I say, why does Horace Carver, a lawyer in Charlottetown, need to have the legal constitutional right to own 1,000 acres of land in Prince Edward Island? Okay, why? Because as long as we keep those rights there, then we enable legislation to exist that makes it convenient to assist me in a legal opinion how to distribute $180 million in this province. Is it a situation of where farmers need a certain amount of land in order to do what they need to do with some good crop rotation that's enforced by farmers themselves, and that non-farmers or individuals who own land who don't enable farmers to rent the land, should those individuals have the right to own less land? I'm very happy in my life with owning no land. I'd be happy with 100 acres or 500 acres. I don't know. But somewhere along the line, those types of questions, I have tried to get some discussion, and nobody wants to discuss it. In fact, they go the other way and always show me an example of where you have to protect the retired farmer who wants to own their land and rent it out. Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about individuals who have gone out and decided, Andrew, to, instead of putting their money into stocks and bonds, to go out and buy a whole bunch of acres of land and sit on it. You know, does that do anything?
Well, our family lives out in Olds, Alberta, and there's people from Middle East areas coming out and saying to people, we want to buy the land and we'll rent it to you for $1. We'll buy their land, and their mortgage is basically forgiven, so they don't have that land to pay for. So that allows them to generate a little more income. But at day 10, when they want the land, it's time to go. And I think if, we start doing that through real estate investment firms and through large corporations, I think we're getting into, the common landowner not being able to do his thing, or, which I think is above some of the things that maybe we're talking about, I guess.
No, it may be right what we're talking about. One of the things that I feel, even if I can't deal with, I wish I could, is how to pay you guys more. The only thing I can do is my own life and how we operate. And I wish you were all paid more. And although you could have hundreds of people in the room, yes, we want the farmers to be paid more. Well, maybe we should follow them as they go to the supermarkets, as they make choices and all of this type of stuff. There's some of those things I cannot. I'm not that good to be able, with a wish-wash, to take care of that. I wish some days I had that magical ability to do stuff, but I'm sorry I can't. But what you're talking about, Andrew, is very, very important. I have not heard from the Real Estate Association. I've had one or two people stop me in the street, their agents, make a few comments, but I have had numerous people stop me in the street and make comments. It's been unbelievable, actually, even at church. Seriously, it's been amazing. But one of the things that has amazed, I know there are people that are critical of this act, but this act has done certain things that may have protected you people in this room and other rooms in this province more than you realize. The perception is out there beyond Prince Edward Island by a lot of places. It's impossible to buy land in Prince Edward Island. The rules and regulations are so tough. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was asked by a national lawyers magazine to write an article on land laws in Prince Edward Island. So guess what I wrote on? I wrote on land laws in Prince Edward Island. And it is not that difficult for a non-resident to own land in Prince Edward Island if you go about it in a logical, well-prepared manner and go through the steps and processes. But the impression is out there that it's very difficult, if not impossible. And as my late political mentor would say, perception in politics is more important than reality. So in some ways, the Land Protection Act, by its image, has protected and done things that some of you people mightn't necessarily agree with. Except for the case in the late 80s about the leasing in and leasing out dispute, I am not aware of any other court case pertaining to the Lands Protection Act in the past 30 years. Okay? There was an attempt in the early 90s. The first Premier Giz hired me to represent the government in a matter, and it looked as if it might be going to court, but it wasn't. It was resolved and settled, and I represent the government in that particular matter. So in some ways, folks, to have had an act like this for as long as we've had it and have not been tested in the courts more than that one particular situation is perhaps rather good in many ways. Okay? But we have to be careful that we don't overlook the fact that we're dealing in a different world today than we were in '82. Different in a whole bunch of ways. one of the things I'm afraid of is money and the volume of money in the future and how that's going to act. And those are hard questions, because if you have people, there in a second, Margaret, if you have people that want to sell their land, Andrew, and they haven't invested in RSPs and they haven't done this and everything else, then how do you say to somebody, you are going to take half the price compared to what I can get for somebody else? Now, I think there's some solutions to that, of, in certain instances, providing government to buy certain development rights and issue certain tax receipts and all of these things. I think we need to be a little bit more creative than we have in the past. That's if we value the land.
What I find on this absentee landowner thing, what I find disturbing is the absentee landowner thing, we've been there already, it didn't work. That was, 300 years ago? When I first got here, nobody could own land because all the lords and ladies and London owned all the land in PTI. And now, like Andrew, I'm very concerned. Property across the road, some guy from Alberta bought it. And he comes to me and says, will you cut the hay? I said, no, I'm not going to cut your hay, but I'll farm it. He said, fine, anything but potatoes. I don't like this, because I need to work with my neighbors. I need to keep peace in the neighborhood, keep peace in the family, and if I want to farm that land traditionally, I should be able to. But we've got foreigners that happen in Kelly's Cross too. These ladies show up, buy a farm, and they say to the guy that was farming, they say, farm organically. But he says, I don't farm organically. They said, too bad, goodbye. So not only could we have foreign companies coming in here buying land en masse, and that's not good to have the absentee landowners, but suddenly they're dictating what we can do with the land too. Because the potato thing, rightly or wrongly has a black eye. And if we can make it better, my hands are going to be tied to work with these guys when the landowners start telling me or anybody else, no potatoes or farm organically or any of this stuff. They're coming in here with a perception.
Well, Randall, just so I can respond to one thing there. You won't be able to, if the laws stay the way they are, it will be impossible for a corporation, non-resident shareholders or resident shareholders, to acquire more than 5 acres land or more than 165 feet along the water, including their existing land holdings, without going through executive council.
Okay.
What I was talking about earlier doesn't have to do with corporations. It has been a little creative with individuals. Okay?
Well, this is an individual I was dealing with. So.
I know, but if it's a corporation.
But still, Mr. Hurley, those foreign users are still limited to 1,000 acres, even if they could do it. Right?
Yeah, yes. If non-resident ownership be up to 1,000 acres. But see, one of the questions that Iraq is probably asking, and should be asking, and I give them the benefit of the doubt, is that if Horace Carver doesn't need 1,000 acres to survive in Charlottetown, why does a non-resident corporation need to have 1,000 acres?
It's just investment.
And that is another fancy word for speculation.
That's right.
And
Once I had heard of a farmer down in Kingston who sold his farm to a Chinese. Now, is that a possibility?
yes.
So the Chinese can come in and buy whatever,
No,
whatever they want, but
no.
they can buy land.
They can buy land, but
But they have to be creative about it. Is that what you're saying?
well, when somebody who's a non-resident of Prince Edward Island, Robert, wants to buy land in Prince Edward Island, and they're not a resident, then they have to make an application to Iraq, and then it goes to executive council and so forth. And Iraq charges a fee, and the lawyers' fees are higher because going through all of that and so forth. And but in a situation of where someone wants to buy a farm, then you get into opportunity of guidelines. Has it been advertised? Have people had the opportunity to buy it? Are people going to be paying this price? And it does get into some difficult questions. And we take a lot of swings at Iraq from time to time, although I haven't heard them tonight. But one of the things that they look at is what is the threshold in this particular community already existing of non-resident ownership. For example, folks, let's see, this is a strong area of non-resident ownership right along here, from Greenwich up to East Point. And then you've got some down around Point Prim, you've got some where my late mother comes from, Murray Harbour, you've got some on around New London area, Cavendish, not unexpected. This is stronger than I thought it would be up around Castlemaine. I'm surprised, but maybe that's because I don't know that particular area. And so forth. And
What do you mean non-resident? Maybe if you define that, people would want to.
I have defined it. I have defined it.
Developments? Are these big developments, or are these like one-owner cottages or something?
What they are is the person owns the parcel of land. Well, let's go to a little bit. Some of you guys try and get into trouble.
No, he was just saying that Mike Duffy is good.
I knew you didn't want to be there.
Just to change the tempo a bit.
I wouldn't mind at all if there was a Senate vacancy created. But the only problem is, in order to qualify, I have to be age 30. Okay, and I have to own $4,000 worth of land in Prince Edward Island. So maybe some of you would sell me $4,000 worth of land. But to answer your question, Charlotte, is that over 16,000 non-resident owned properties, that's a parcel of land. You have a number, it could be for a lot, it could be 100 acres or 50 acres, of which 3,600, almost a quarter, border the coastline. 13% of all properties on Prince Edward Island are non-resident owned. In the Lands Protection Act, as it is right now, a resident is defined as somebody who is in Prince Edward Island for 183 days. It doesn't say consecutive days, it's 183 days. Okay? So when they applied to acquire this land, they were non-residents. But it's possible to use the regulations, which I was responsible for in part when they were put in place. For example, is that I have a daughter in Calgary, married, kids, husband. Now, if I own land and I want to transfer land to my daughter, I can do so without going to IRAC and without going to Executive Council.
Personal.
It goes this way, Derek. It goes from grandparent, parent, grandchild, down, and it goes across as well, okay? And so that was put in place so that people could do for families without going through the extra costs and things like this. And this would be gleaned from property tax bills, where the addresses are, okay? And it also says in the Lands Protection Act regulations that if I am a resident of the province and I become a non-resident province, it doesn't force me then to apply to get the permission to own the land if I already had a legal deed beforehand, okay? And it's one way. Sorry. That's sort of how it works. I'll come to you in a second, Margaret.
It is related to that issue, though.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make one more point, and thank you, and we'll go right to you then. Is that when this legislation came into existence in 1982, and there were various other forms of legislation beforehand, but in 1982, and it was done as a result of a legislative committee of the legislature, Gordon Lank was the chair of it. Both parties, there was unanimous agreement, as I recall, and they made 18 recommendations. And this is where the Lands Protection Act came. Angus MacLean was a driving force in this. The revolutionary part of the Lands Protection Act is this, that for the first time, residents of Prince Edward Island had a limit placed on what they can own. Okay? And one of my surprises in this, last time I'll mention it tonight, is should that 1,000-acre limit, and I'm putting this out, should it be lowered if you are a non-farmer and don't have your farming lands in the farming situation? But one of the things that in 1982 is different than it is today is this. In 1982, If you were a farm corporation, McCardle Farms, all you had to do was to say on your deed that you were a body corporate and you were a farming corporation. You didn't go to IRAC. Okay? You didn't go to executive council. That was substantially changed, and various changes happened in this act over a period of time. This substantially changed because there became a question of, was the person determining whether they're a farm corporation or not a farm corporation? Were they a bona fide farmer? Or Peter Boswell, you'd be interested in this, bona fide farmer. Was that being made up, that decision being made by the people that was really benefiting, i.e. the particular unit involved, or should be done something differently by arm's length? So the government changed and said, okay, it's fine. We think there's been some potential situations here we'd like to know about. So all corporations have to do it. So that's why it changed. Margaret.
You're suggesting by saying horse, car, could own, or should he be able to own, say, 1,000 acres or whatever. Are you suggesting that there should be limits there, or?
Well, I'm throwing it out, but throwing it out.
Because I do have a personal friend who is not a farmer, has never farmed. He owns 2 farms.
Yes.
Part of that original farm, what he did was he subdivided it, so I guess some of it might be up there as being non-resident owners. He does have just tons of money that he could go and buy any property he wants. He owns numerous companies. But I have concerns because I don't think he necessarily would be. He's the kind that will find ways around things.
Well, sorry.
It probably should be wise to have some control. Now, he admits he's not a farmer.
Yeah.
I would presume that some of the farm is being leased.
Well,
So it's already happening.
Sure. I don't know the situation involving your friend.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot of details on the year and
Right.
don't want to.
Right. I just make the observation that there seems to be a fair bit of discussion that 1,000 should go higher. And I'm going to give up on this point right tonight, but I will try for several other meetings. I'll come back to you. Is that what's the difference? Why can't it be lower? Sir?
I'm sitting there listening, very interesting, and I'm picking up on the point that I can remember back when this limit was put on, and as I remembered, it was to stop. The idea was completely to stop the people, land grabbers, from coming in and buying land. That's the purpose of it. Am I right with that? Like Dundas Farms was buying land, and that was around the time they thought that they put a stop to that. So that limit came into that at that time.
Well,
talk to that.
Dundas Farms is around here, and that has a very interesting story involving Howard Webster and the whole Webster family, the Globe and Mail, and so forth. Then you have Henderson Lumber in here, and they're both gone now. And sometimes people think that that situation will only get worse. Well, we had a gentleman up in Surrey the other night that tells us that he bought a fair bit of the Dundas non-resident lands and brought it back into production. I know someone else that brought it back and went to blueberries and on and on and on. So, that's sort of an interesting story. I honestly believe this. This is what I believe about 82, and one of these days I am going to go to the basement and pull out my old legislative boxes. My wife will be absolutely delighted that I'm starting to look at that stuff to get rid of some of it. But I think I will find speeches in there, and I think I'm going to find some other records along these lines. What's your name, please?
Jimmy Carruthers.
Okay. Jimmy, I think that I'm going to find something like this, that there was grave concern in the agricultural community about the time about vertical integration in the late 1970s and early 80s. That We also had a fair bit of non-resident ownership, and it was happening in leaps and bounds, and people were coming in with lots of American money and buying up. But I can tell you that a driving force on the Lands Protection Act and by putting in limits for resident islanders was Situate and Premier Angus MacLean. Okay? He was Situate in his mindset. Okay? And a few years ago, when they took and made all these constituencies that were 16 in number, dual constituencies, and cut them down to a certain number, there was a contest that was initiated by some people in Charlottetown that they wanted many more seats here. Okay? And then the government was opposing it, and they had Angus MacLean as a witness. It was a Liberal government. They called him as a witness. And the people representing the city of Charlottetown, they were questioning former Premier MacLean on the stand, and they were asking him how come he thought that all these smaller areas should have some pretty good representation in the legislature, even though they had less population in Charlottetown. And the former premier's answer to the question was, well, who's going to represent the land? And the lawyer, you have to say, Charlottetown, told me later he decided he wouldn't ask many more questions to Angus MacLean. Okay. Now, don't take any of these comments, my stories, as indication where I'm going. You only know two things. Going to be something here with landscape, and viewscape, and land banking. But I am saying to you that the Lands Protection Act has changed a little bit over time, and if it hadn't been put in place, I think that this province would be radically different today in regards ownership in 2013 than it was in 1982. And to me, I'm interested in all your comments, but I'm also interested in some things that people haven't said, and I'm hoping that some of these things will appear and about some of this stuff and so forth.
I think, sir, you should put a feather in your hat, because I fully agree with you that we have things that limit did deter people from buying big chunks of land, and it worked quite nicely until now. And I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't increase it, because when you increase it, you're opening yourself up to the land grabbers, and then you might be, we pay $3,000 an acre, $3,500 an acre for our land. But if somebody came in with $10,000 an acre, everybody it would be all for sale. So let's keep it so that we'll be able to keep farming ourselves. That's what I think.
Sure.
And I'm going to say the other thing is, I think that I'll make the comment that I don't think that an individual that's not farming has to have 1,000 acres. I definitely don't think they need 1,000 acres. So it should be, that road should be taken away. That's my opinion. So I'll make a comment on that. Yeah.
Well, your finger of one represents the first comment along those lines. Yes, or you could. I think, Margaret. Sorry, did you finish your comments?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, Jimmy. Jimmy, do you farm?
Yes.
Where? Gustine?
No, I'm in Hamilton.
Oh yes. I always been intrigued by that name Hamilton. Yeah, like it's a pretty distinguished name, and all that stuff. And so anyway, there was John Ramsey, and there was a Mr. Hunter with him the other night in Kensington. So before the meeting started, I asked him to explain to me how Hamilton came to an existence. Well, about 10 minutes later, I got this detailed story how one name was this, two communities, they had whatever, and Hamilton existed. Anyway, it's a fascinating story. Urban, you're back again.
Mr. Carver, my heat's gone, so I have to heat it up again. But
all right, sir.
This is, I was intrigued in Kensington by your, Urban Laughlin again, by your statement that you and your father were delivering potatoes into a grocery store in Charlottetown.
Yeah, that's right.
And you did that for several years. And all of a sudden, we don't need you anymore, because another farmer came in here and offered us 25 cents a bag less. That farmer should have said, okay, I'll go to the next place. You'd still be selling your potatoes, see? That's what learn to live with one another, not off one another.
Randall, Thank you very much. I was hoping you'd
You're
stay
gonna
until the
leave
meeting was
Farm
over. But anyway, well, we'll see you in Crapple.
You'll never see me again.
Oh, I didn't think I was that tough on you.
After what I said about the forces of evil that cannot be named, just be a bud and avenge my death, will you?
You wait till you run for dog catcher, and I'll not support you.
I got a cow that's calving.
I know. Go ahead.
Anyway, thank you for coming. I appreciate your comments and your levity.
Cow has to calve. What time God waits for no man, darn few women and calf. Anyway, that reminded me of this heritage, heritage from Alma, I believe. Griffin Heritage Potatoes and Sobeys were having a deal on February, $5.99 a bag. So I bought a bag. We got all kinds of in the basement. And anyway, I got another bag then later on near the end of the month and gave them both away. And all of a sudden, then here's McCain's potatoes here, right when you walk in from the liquor store. That's where the traffic is. And I go over there and I have a look at the Heritage potatoes in March. $2.99. No more, giving away 25 cents a bag each. So what they did was pay $3 more. Each one gave 25 cents to a Larry Museum, Potato Museum. Yeah, and then down goes the price, so they didn't give anything away, with all due respect. That's marketing, see? So, anyway, I'll have some conclusion here. I had some dealings with, I mentioned Greg Donald. I praised him up there in Kensington. He's now manager of PEI Potato Board. And we dealt for years, 40 years, with NFU, dealt with fertilizer people, McCain's and Irving's and Scales for 1985, 1995. In the post-Greg Donald era, we always got to deal with him. We're having negotiations. And then we're dealing with the post-era with two new fellows in Charlottetown. And one fellow's name is LeClaire. I forget the other fellow's name. And we couldn't get a deal. And the very last time we dealt with Greg Donald, I must say, we walked in and they had their no what do they call a slip charge. I said, "You fellows aren't ready, are you? When's the next meeting?" I said. We met 2 weeks' time. Got a deal done. Then, now the post-Greg Donald era. Two new fellas. "Oh, you can't deal anymore." They said, "No." "Well, you can't." "Well, who's the fellow above you?" "He's in New Brunswick." They had to follow up the Maritimes. "Bring him over," I said. So he came over in a week's time, all by himself. And he said, "Thanks us very much." And we had another day. We had another meeting. He said, "Oh," he said, "I guess we can't deal with you anymore." What he did was he knew 90% of our larger growers were not able to leave them. So he didn't care about the other 10% because they were smaller. And that's didn't need us anymore, see? So that's my true life story, so I'll leave it at that, Mr. Carver, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, some of the terms of reference here, I think we're going to go on for another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll stay here as long as you like. Haven't heard any conversations tonight, as I recall, on reducing red tape and regulatory requirements.
Yeah,
Robert?
Well, we need IRA. And that's fine. I can live with IRAC. But then when it comes to the provincial departments, there's a lot more, there's another set of rules, regulations, and it just seems forever to get everything done.
Specifics, please.
Well, I don't know if I want to go into specifics. All I'm saying is that, I was in the process of doing a piece of business and had all my work passed by IRAC, and then I take it into Access PEI, and whatever, then I had to go back and get my surveyor back again, It just seemed to be a lot.
And Robert, was your land identified?
Well, yeah.
That always adds to it.
Yeah. There was a problem with the land, but it's not an easy fix, and it takes months.
How many of you know that if your land is identified, that you can have your land identification over in 11 years just by signing a little piece of paper? Randall Affleck knows that.
I read it in Larry 2 weeks ago.
You found it on the Leary.
Explain what identified means.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Okay.
For
Well,
agricultural purposes.
Well, when you're, if you have land that has been put into a corporation letter,
Yes.
then the government would have identified that land. IRAC would have recommended identification.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Okay,
right.
and so it goes through executive council and then stamped, identified, it's been transferred over.
Okay.
But if you had given notice of that 1 year after it gone in place, then that could be over in 10 years' time. And so if you decided 3 years after it went into your company that you wanted to deed a piece of land to Andrew, okay, then then you'd have to go through a certain process. You have to publish the newspaper and go through to IRAC and executive council in order to get that taken care of. And like for example, I had a situation last fall. Some people from away were coming here, and they wanted to buy a farm and get into it and all that type of stuff, and they were very serious about it. You know, it's one dwelling on it, on this farm down east, and the other sister wanted to be able to build a new place in a year's time, and the sister would be in the older place. Well, I thought it'd be very simple to ask IRAC to do the approval, have it land identified, but exempt out the 1 acre for the second sister to build a house. IRAC says no. Okay, we identified. You come back down the road and do it and survey it and all that type of stuff. Anyway, I just make the observation that it seems to me that it ought to have been possible for IRAC to give the approval of transfer with identification, but saying within the next 3 years you can come and I have this surveyed out without coming back again. Okay. So there are a lot of people in this province who have their lands identified that had been given the proper notice a number of years ago would no longer be identified. And they would be rid of some of those hassles and problems.
Am I correct in, like, when land transfers, it's automatic that it's identified? I thought it was automatically identified, and that if you applied right away, in the 11 years, it would...
Yeah. If it goes to your corporation, Randall, it's automatically identified when it's transferred over. If it is a non-resident coming to buy land outside the municipality, it's going to be identified. Okay, and it means no commercial development, no subdivisions, and all that type of stuff. Okay. All right. Any other comments? There's an awful lot of people here that are quiet. Is the other Mr. Gardner going to say anything? Dwight?
I guess we're one of the so-called large contract growers, and we went that way by choice. I guess we were selling and processing potatoes before Irving's ever took over the plant. And I've been home in the farm for 24 crops, and I hope to be there for a while yet. We got to the point, you were asking about acres, how we got from the 50,000 up to 110 back down. I guess the 70s and 80s, we were shipping 8 to 10 million hundredweight off the end of the wharf that were going export, and it wasn't putting any impact on the North American market. And at that time, that went up through the 80s into the 90s. Then McCain's built a plant here, and they needed extra production, so it got bumped up. 95, the announcement of the Cavendish plant. Growers kind of jumped the gun there, went in a year early and grew too many potatoes. But the following year, when Cavendish needed potatoes to run that plant, they went around to a lot of new growers, existing growers, looking for volume. and they had to go to New Brunswick for a couple of years to get enough potatoes to run that plant, because we were still putting seed and table on the boats. They were getting $8 to $9 for that. They kind of thought the processing contract, $5.50, $6 that time, wasn't rich enough. So their current growers were asked to grow more and fill that in. They're bringing less in from across now. But in the meantime, on the export side, the rest of the world has become more productive, more mechanicalized. Their different growing areas are getting bigger production. So we lost that export, and it got shoved into the North American market because it wasn't going out the end of the war. It got pushed into Toronto and the East Coast and that started putting the pressure on this side. And our prices, I'll say it right now, we're price takers. We're an exporting province into North America, the majority of it. All across Canada, probably close to 70% of the French fries and table potatoes are going into U.S. markets. So as far as talking of a quota system or something, you can't control an export quota. You're going into that market. And so that's where we get down to it now. Because of that, there was the buy-down program for a couple of years that took out 25,000 acres, and we're down to where we currently are. But as far as demand and price, I mean, it's up to individual growers to determine whether they can make a living at the current price. And the contract is negotiated every spring. And I guess when you sign the contract, you know whether you're going to be around for another year or not. But we got to the stage where we were because we were willing to grow what the customer wanted. We were with McCain's for a number of years when they built the plant, but it got to the point they started downsizing. We lost that volume from them, and now we're just solely with Cavendish. On the crop rotation, it discriminates against a number of growers. Just because you're not on a so-called 3-year rotation, you're supervised on what management plan you have to apply. But anybody that's on a 3-year rotation, whether it's potatoes, wheat crop, soybeans, that's not putting any organic matter back into your soil, there's no supervision. Their ground is perhaps red all 3 years, or canola mixed in with it or something. There's very little, so it discriminates to some growers on that. The land limits, as far as the 3,000 on a family farm doesn't mean a thing, because the first problem you have, the primary owner's got to give up 2/3 of ownership to get to 3,000s, and not too many will do that. I mean, lots of comments have been just pass the shares down to your kids and that, but they get married and could get divorced or whatnot, you start losing that. So I can imagine them coming into an accounting firm or a legal office and say that you have to drop some of your clients because you don't have enough shareholders. Like if they limit your client numbers to a certain number and one drops out, then all of a sudden you've got to cut 1/3 of your client base just because you're over the limit. I was never in favor of the acre thing right from day one. My grandfather was overseas for World War II, and he fought for our freedom to have choice and whatnot. And I just feel that we need to farm, like we're living here. I'm 7th generation here, daughters are 8, and they plan on living here in Prince Edward Island, so we're trying to do the best we can with what we have to work with.
Well, certainly you've highlighted several issues, and you've heard about soybeans almost as much as potatoes. And the matter of, although you didn't use the word, it's really in many ways talking about the family farm succession and the 3 shareholders issue. It's much more of an issue than people can perhaps appreciate unless you are in that situation. And if you are in the situation, it's difficult. I listened with great interest in Kensington to listen to several people after the meeting in several small groups, the agony they expressed. It's very difficult for me as a lawyer. If I see a farmer coming through a door wanting to make a will, I would be more than pleased if he went to my competition. It's the most difficult person in the world to make a will for as a farmer, because you're balancing three things. You're balancing the spouse, you're balancing a daughter or son in the farming industry, and you're balancing the farm. I don't mind making a will for a farmer that has one spouse and one child on the farm. That's not too bad.
And the red tape with IRAC, it just compounds it. We got to file every year at year end, and then anytime you're putting land in or out, you've got to make an application. Several times we tendered for land, and in the process that it was done, we had to buy it personally, then go and have it transferred over.
And the reason you had to do that, Dwight, because were in a time crunch. You had to deal with it within weeks, and you didn't have 7 or 8 weeks in order to deal with it.
Yeah. So it's just compounds the legal bill.
Yeah. And all I simply asked is, did you want to say anything to say? And you're covering every conceivable topic, whatever, okay?
Mr. Chairman, I didn't get his name. You know who he is.
Well, his name is Dwight Gardner.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently he's the kid brother of Derry Gardner. And they're sitting on opposite side of the room. Bertha's in between them. David, before we come to you,
Tom Gardner was a great hockey player way back to primary police.
Well, there's, and in this neck of the woods in Summerside, you have Gardner as a surname and Gardner as a first name. I want to ask you a couple of questions. We'll come to you, David Ling, in a moment. You mentioned about the leasing in and leasing out. You just passed that in reference to IRAC and reports. At one time, you've always had to, under the Lands Protection Act, count the leased-in lands. And that has been because this is not just a law that deals with ownership. It deals with land holdings and the various concepts and so forth to deal with that. That's the reason why private mortgages are covered under the Lands Protection Act and so forth. And then there was the court case in the late 80s in which the Court of Appeals said that you can deduct the lands that you are leasing out. And then in the mid-90s, the government of the day said, no, we're notwithstanding the court case and the Court of Appeal, we are going to make you count your leased lands in, and you can't deduct the leased lands out. Okay. Now, and that seems in many ways illogical in many people's minds. Because if Patrick owns 100 acres, he has to put that in his land holding. If he leases it to Horace Carver, then I have to count it. Okay? But if I have other lands and I lease it out, I can't deduct it, even though, Dwight, if you're the leasee, you have to count it in. So I asked the question, what difference would it make as far as the farmers are concerned if you had to count your leased-in lands, but were able to deduct bona fide leased-out lands? What would that do to, I'm looking at Dwight Gardner, how would that affect you or others in the room, Dwight?
Well, it's just the paperwork to do, to file that every year. And the problem is, a lot of times it's done after the fact, because come spring, land can change around in a week's notice.
Yeah, I know, it's the global thing.
It just, you don't know what's available until the last minute, or whether you need more land, or if land shows up.
Okay, but with the raise, no, I appreciate your answer. Do you lease out lands?
No.
Okay, so, Jimmy?
Under that scenario, could a farmer not grow a lot more potatoes by doing that way? Because they lease out the land to somebody else to grow the barley or in the hay, could they not increase their acreage 3 times if they were allowed to do that? I mean, I'm just thinking. I don't know.
That's the idea.
That would be the case.
Is to keep your potato acres at a certain number, and you transfer land in and out to maintain your crop rotation.
But if you only were responsible, let's say 1,000 acres, just an individual for 1,000 acres, and if you were to could you not, let me see now, could you not grow 1,000? No, you wouldn't. I'm
You
thinking.
still only have control of the 1,000 acres at any given time.
See,
But it could be 1,000 acres.
Yeah, the breakdown, the breakdown in the past has been, there were two reasons why this legislation was changed. One was because I think there was some concern that vertical integration was perhaps occurring in certain levels, and that maybe some individuals were attempting through their employees and so forth to lease out lands, and it was a sham. The other situation is, never mind the vertical integration, that corporate level, is that I may lease out to Dwight, but it's just a piece of paper that's worthless because I really have control of it, and all control, which is not the case in a true lease because you pass the control over by lease. But somewhere along the line in some of this stuff, people talk about lawyers and loopholes and everything else. I'm recently of the opinion that maybe some of the residents of Prince Edward Island are pretty well informed about the loopholes themselves. But we're going to come back to you later.
Questions more
But the other,
I'm not going to go there.
The other factor, too, that in the past, previous generations, as the farm handed down to two brothers, say, they went out on their own and farmed separately.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, they might have shared a few pieces of equipment back and forth and whatnot, but they had their own identities and they were out on their own. But today, now, with the economy of scale, families are getting staying together, and perhaps even neighbors are joining forces to make this more viable. So that takes, if they're controlling, that's why they need this larger land base under a single identity.
When I grew up in Hazelbrook, Dwight, I was pretty proud because the Carvers had the largest farms in Hazelbrook. Oh, I thought that was something. That consisted of 3 farms. One was 50 acres, one was 100 acres, and the other was 30 acres. We had 180 acres of land. I thought that was fantastic. We shared the machinery on the halves with the neighbor, but we operated our own lands, and just to share the machinery, we did the own crops. I'm increasingly hearing, even tonight before the meeting started, of more joint ventures all the time. David, I owe you an opportunity to speak.
Just getting back to the seed market.
Yes.
February 91 was when the PBYN hit. And I think that was a deliberate strike. It was a mistake that scientists made, and they never lived up to it. But yet the receipt business never recovered, and that's when the processing took over. We used to ship a dozen trailer loads of seed to Ontario, and we were buying some too. And we used to get a very good price for seed. And that was what Eugene Whalen was saying back in Fern River in the late 80s or whatever. We should concentrate on the seed market here, to leave the fresh market the way it in the processing, work on the seed, because we were, it's an isolated area here, and we should have good quality seed, which was at one time. But anyway, getting back to prices too, how in the heck can any farmer survive the same prices that farmers paid today and what we were back 30 years ago? 2 acres of potatoes paid for a brand new 60 horsepower tractor in '73 when I started. I was farming 2 acres of seed potatoes. One trailer, 500 hundredweight, could eat some sand. Superior seed. What in the heck would you buy with a trailer full of potatoes today? Bloody potatoes. Tired.
David, I can't answer your questions.
I think it's good time that those farmers got to realize we've got to look at a marketing system of some kind. I don't know how it will ever be done, but we're not going to do it by getting bigger.
Dwight?
The Potato Board has tried a number of times of minimum price structure, and all it does is set the floor price. You can't enforce something when, again, we're an exporting province, you're competing with other areas, and it hasn't happened. And I don't know whether we've talked about it even at Port Council in Ottawa. It's been talked about, it'd have to be all across Canada, and the willingness is not there.
I don't know what's whether we go along with it 2 years ago, but whatever happened
Now, Idaho, the only time they want to become involved is when they get to the bottom of the barrel. And then they want the industry's help, and as soon as they get her pushed up, they walk away.
Now, she's sitting in the back row. She seems to like the back row. Karen.
She likes to listen, but she likes to talk too.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that, Karen. Nice to have you.
Maybe I'm naive.
I doubt it.
To me, the Lands Protection Act means one thing in my mind as a priority, and that is the ability of that land to be passed down to the generations to come, knowing that they have taken over the ownership, the directorship, the stewardship, call it what you want, of that land, knowing that their forefathers, whoever they may be, relatives, whatever, have taken the best care that they can of the land that they were given. And to me, we can skirt the issue as much as we want, but if we don't control the problem and look at it, we're not doing any good. We're doing the land a disservice, as far as I'm concerned. Potatoes, yes, they're a problem. Apparently, there are some potato varieties out there that have the ability, or are coming online, that have the ability to nitrogen fix, which would be a great thing, especially in our area. I'm not saying that I'm for or against more land. I'm not against my farmer neighbors by any means, but what I am against is anoxic problems in the rivers, free fall of soil into those rivers, whether we can control it with silt traps, whether we can control it by means of better tubers that are coming online. Maybe we've gotten caught up in the context that modern technology is so great that we have to rely on what we're being told. And to me, the chemical industry has taken over a lot of the agriculture decision-makings that are being made. And I just think we're doing a disservice through this by not saying we have to protect first, then we will look after the acreage. Do what you can the best way you can, and we have 25%. You said it yourself. We have 25% of the acreage on this island that isn't being controlled by a 3-year rotation. And a 3-year rotation to me, and like I say, maybe I'm naive, maybe it was the way I was brought up, but with a 3-year rotation, clover, a grass crop has to be in that 3-year rotation. It's as simple as that. If you can't control the organic matter and keep it up there, you aren't stabilizing your soil.
Karen Cobb. She has been at 3 meetings, and thank you, Karen. Thank you. Now, Kenny, do you have anything to say? Bill Trainer, you gentlemen along there, you must have some thoughts. Bill?
I'm not long with words, but this is something, first of all, I'm Bill Trainer,
Yes.
and I live in Emerald, and I live in a community that's as big as, it's probably as big as the acreage that is presently allowed to be farmed by a corporation. We're talking 3,000 acres.
Sure.
It's a community that once, when I lived there all but 7 years of my life. I was raised on a farm. I didn't make my living at farming. But this is something that's very dear to my heart and my soul in terms of the way the land is used, the way it should be used. I did make some notes, and incidentally, I didn't think of speaking at all tonight. I've been going to these meetings, And I was waiting for the opportunity to go to a meeting where I didn't have all my friends and my neighbors.
Did we succeed tonight?
No.
Wait.
But there's been some brave, very brave souls that spoke here tonight.
Yes.
And Randall, actually both Randalls, but Randall that left, he said some people are scared.
Yes.
And you know, that couldn't be more true. And like I understand that this independent commission, I made some notes, was appointed to ensure that the Lands Protection Act of 1982 meets the current needs of islanders. My question is, what are those needs? And are you really, and I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm wondering, are you really hearing what the needs of islanders are? And like through this, and I don't know all the answers and I don't know the way you do it, but you talk about how many people show up at these meetings. How many, when we talk about the needs of islanders, well, are they really going to be knowing after this commission has done its work? Because how many?
Well, actually, contrary to sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
I think that it would be fair to say that some people in government who have followed other commissions, not necessarily in land, who have gone out there, if we were to compare these numbers to those numbers, we're having a bumper crop, as they would say in the potato business. We're having a bumper crop. And I know I've heard it, Bill, tonight, I've heard it elsewhere, that people are afraid and scared, but you have to be careful what someone wishes for. If I am to provide an opportunity for anyone under the sun to come and have a private meeting with me, then I can't be restrictive of who those individuals are. And when you go down that road, there might be people coming through the door that some others would think that it's not good. So I'm doing it this way. And when it's all said and done, the meetings and briefs, if there are individuals or people I want to talk to that I feel a need to hear from somebody, I'm going to contact them and I'll make the selection. And I'm the only one making the list. And you and I haven't met before tonight, but if you check me out a little bit, you'll find them as independent as can be. And you can't twist my mind one way other than where it's going to go. And right now, I don't know where my mind's going. But I'm awful glad I asked you to speak because I see you're prepared.
Well, a lot of what I have written here, has been said by
I want to hear it again from you.
Okay. Well, I go on and I feel this is about the current wants of a few islanders who have been pressured by a few very large non-island corporations who don't really know the meaning of enough. What is it about, like I said, I was from Emerald, the area, 3,000. There was 20 farmers, 20 families made a living off farms, and I realized farming has changed. We now have 3 farmers. What is it about industrial farming today that makes it difficult to earn a living for 3,000 acres of land? I mean, it's hard for me to think that they need more to be competitive. The damage here with bigger land parcels is depleted woodlands, hedgerows. We talk about crop rotation, and that's been talked about tonight, and that's very important. But if you're cutting down all your tree lines and woods, and we talked about this lady up west talked about the soil. We have it in our area too, in terms of the red, the wind, and I lived in the West for a couple of years, and it's not going to be too long, if things continue the way they are, that farmers are going to have to only spring plow. With the way our hedgerows are disappearing, our woods, and I feel that's only going to get worse with increased acreages. And I feel to an extent, the land that's been rented now, that's somewhat controlled. Because those people, they were raised in my father's generation who believed very much in that type of stewardship. I feel we're going, degraded soil, poisoned waters, dead rivers, and this all leads, in terms we talked about, it's been talked, cancer rates and that, to serious health issues. Our soils are becoming so over-farmed, they're blowing away. We need more and more chemicals to make them productive. Coupled with uprooting of tree lines and the little woodland we have left. It has been argued, and I've heard this at a meeting, put forward that we need more acreage to produce more to meet the cost of production. Maybe we should be looking harder at the cost of production versus increased acres. And I heard a spokesman for the Federation of Agriculture argue, because there are fewer farms, they need to be larger. Maybe this organization might argue that when farmers become a vanishing species, we need to address the causes of their disappearance and look for an alternative. Last, at Kensington's meeting, Mr. Bell, I believe is his name, spoke of the venues, and I know, and he didn't want to see those destroyed, and I certainly agree with him. But one of the things when after a question about, he realized that farmers were under a lot of pressure, and as far as they would, we're not near the quota of land that you're allowed to have is not near what it is in the mainland. Well, the reality is we don't have this land base. So to me, it's a useless comparison. It has been said also by those in favor of larger allotted parcels that those against, meaning people that are against that, are so far from being impacted by this legislation, they don't want anything done about it. My comment on that remark is everybody is impacted. And the reality, and part of the reality of that is they just don't know how much. Something that has been said, which I agree with, and that was said at a meeting, we are moving toward a model where the young farmers will have a management role only. They won't have true stewardship of their land. In my mind, the pressure is on by a few very large-scale companies farming to get even bigger with fewer involved in the future. And the only thing slowing it down is this 1982 legislation. Removal of that protection, even marginally, and I know this is very strong to say, but in my mind, would be an act of betrayal. Islanders have not given this government that mandate. And if there ever was an issue that requires public discussion during an election, it's this one. And then you'd get the true belief and view of Islanders. Because I think they'd feel a lot more comfortable in their own homes talking about this. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bill. We're going to conclude in a couple of minutes, and I am going to invite anyone who hasn't said anything so far to say something. Jean, you were one of the first people here. I noticed your interest, head nodding different times. Anything you'd like to say? Okay. Okay, and Kenny, do you have anything you'd like to say?
The only thing I'd say is plan rotation. I know it's 3 years. 3 years might be fine if there was 100 head of cattle on that farm or 200 pigs. So it could be manured every year or every second year. With the situation about cattle, a lot of them have gone out, and 3 years is just not adequate when there's no manure going on that land.
Okay, thank you. Some people are looking at the floor. Anybody else here? Bill, behind you, anybody there want to say? Anybody else? Over there? Okay. Peter, you're quiet. Do you wish to be that way? Okay. All right. I would...
Who's the last speaker?
Pardon me?
The speaker's name, the last speaker.
Well, I just asked Peter if he wished to say something.
No,
Kenny.
Kenny Anderson.
Kenny Adams?
Kenny Adams. Adams. How do you spell your last name, Kenny?
N-A-N-T-T-S.
I just wanted, Mr. Chairman, to mention the deeds transfer, so anybody likes to talk to me after the meeting.
Sure. If they want to talk to Urban after the meeting, it's fine. I'd just like to say thank you. I wasn't sure what type of meeting this was going to be tonight. It's a community that perhaps I don't know that well. I know a few people from here that have gone on and have bumped into in Charlottetown and so forth. But I've decided, as I said before, to wear my green sweater. And it's a beautiful community to drive through, and on occasion I've stopped to into the store. I don't know if you can still get gas or something like this here, but when you built your school, there's Island Stone on it, isn't there? Okay. And I was Attorney General. I was appointed by Angus MacLean. I was 29 at the time, or perhaps getting close to 30. And he told me I had to take a second portfolio. And I said, well, I'm only... He said, I want you to be Minister of Labour. And I said, I can't be Minister of Labour. He says, why? I says, they're on strike at Perfection Cream. I don't need that. And he said, well, you'll be Minister of Social Services. And I said, no, I can't deal with that. I might have been your boss one time, Kenny. And he says, well, I'm going to tell you what you're going to be, and that's what you're going to be. And so I was in court the day before I was sworn in when the government took over, and I got this telephone call to take it from Angus MacLean, the Premier-elect, so I'm about to take it. And I was told, you're Attorney General, and you're going to be Minister of Public Works for about a year. And I says, okay, I wonder what's involved with that. Well, one of the things involved with this was that I had some decisions and input into when public buildings were being built. And when it came to the construction of the school in Kinkora, I was adamant as Minister of Public Works that we're going to use Island Stone.
Good for you.
And I want to tell you, the fight that I had in the department, I went so far as to have pictures of what it would look like with iron stone put outside the cabinet room so all the cabinet ministers could see it when I was advocating what was going to happen. So anyway, that's a little historical thing about Island Stone in your school. But thank you so much. You've been terrific. I have learned a lot. And I guess I'll say what I have concluded so many times as I've left these meetings. We may not agree on everything in the group, but we have some very talented, articulate, and well-spoken individuals. And I know that if I was running the roads like I used to run the roads in the mid-'70s for Premier McLean, seeking out candidates at these various meetings, I'd have a long list of various articulate people, men and women I'd like to see in balance. I'm around here until you decide to leave. Thank you.